Welcome to the Tuesday, November 19th, Brattleboro Selectboard meeting. We convened at 5:55 and went into executive session where we took no action. At the time, I asked the town manager whether the meeting was properly warned, and he said that it was.
Yes, it was. Yes.
Thanks, John. So the first order of business is to approve minutes. We have minutes from October 30th and November 5th. Can I get a motion? Richard?
I move we accept the minutes of November 5th.
Okay, Richard's made a motion to accept the minutes from November 5th. What about October 30th?
Oh, yeah, and October 30th.
And October 30th, thank you. All right, discussion? France?
Yes, I don't know if a correction has been made, but there was actually an error in the minutes on the result of one of the votes at our November 5th meeting, where it says that the issuance of the entertainment license was approved 5-0, and in fact it was approved 4-1.
Okay, we can get that corrected.
I would urge that that be corrected.
Okay. Any other discussion? Nothing that minor, well, I don't know if it's minor. It is certainly material. So I think we have sort of slightly modified minutes. We ready to vote on it?
I am.
Okay, so Richard made a motion to approve minutes from October 30th and November 5th with Franz's slight correction on a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. Next up is Chair's remarks. I don't have any tonight. We'll move on to manager's comments.
Just a couple things tonight. So just a reminder to everybody that Brattleboro's new parking system starts November 21st. With these changes, we're going from the old pay and display system to pay by plate. There will be no more on-street parking meters. In fact, probably people have seen those mostly have been removed, maybe completely been removed. And the new kiosks have been going in. They will accept coins, but not bills. Pay by text is also an option alongside the Park Smarter app, which information about how to use all these things will be on new signs and also on the town website. One thing, too, to know is that there is free parking offered November 18th, 19th, and 20th during the transition so that people can get used to the new system. Starting on November 21st, it will go into effect, but then on November 24th, on Sunday, Sunday parking fees will now apply. So that is a new part of the parking system that you all approved earlier this year. If you want to learn more information about this, go to brattleboro.gov/parking. Then the other thing is that the Brattleboro Recreation and Parks Department has a wide range of winter activities coming up, including free open gym hours for kids, skating, various events. Sports and classes for all ages are available, like badminton, youth and adult basketball, fencing, gymnastics, and many other things. Registration is now open for those programs, so visit the Gibson Aiken Center where you can register, or you can also register online to participate in these fun activities. And that's all I have tonight.
Great. Thanks, John. Next up, select board comments and or committee reports. France?
Yes, thank you, Daniel. I just want to make brief mention that yesterday there was, I think it was the annual meeting of the Brattleboro Housing Authority. I wasn't able to get there, but I'm planning on watching it on BCTV. So others who are interested in the Housing Authority and a little bit about their history and what they do for the town, that'll be coming up on BCTV very soon, and I hope people will be interested in that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, next up is public participation. This is the part of the meeting where you could speak on something that is not on tonight's agenda. And if you would like to speak, simply raise your hand. I'll ask you to introduce yourself, and you can have up to 3 minutes to speak on the matter. At this point, I want to remind folks about how to engage in this meeting. So raising your hand to be recognized is the first step. If you're on Zoom, you can raise your Zoom hand, and I will do my best to see if I can read your name from this distance. when we're speaking, nobody else should be speaking. We should be listening. If somebody has a different opinion than what we have, that's okay. We can be respectful of that. And, you know, we'll try to run a meeting that is fair and courteous. Okay. And so with that, anyone who wishes to speak on something that is not on tonight's agenda. And so person in the middle with the vest.
Hi, I'm Mary Del Priori, and I'm a 40-year resident of Brattleboro. I live on South Main Street. And I just wanted to give a general comment about the budget. I looked through line by line, and...
Can I stop you? Mm-hmm. So the budget is on our agenda tonight?
Oh, not just the trash portion of it?
No, we do have the budget on afterwards. Okay. If you want to stick around, you know, you can have substantive kind of participation in that rather than just this comment here.
I'm happy to stick around.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Yep.
Mark Younger, listening to you guys talk about taking out the meters. What was the cost? Why did we rip that all out and go to something else? I wasn't around when you guys voted that in. Why did we go that route? Anybody?
Is that the only question you have?
No, we'll start there.
Well, if you can keep going.
Well, okay, to further that, why did we go that route to start with? Cost-wise, I look at, well, let me ask you all, are you all Brattleboro residents, every one of you?
Yes.
So, Mark, the way that we do this is we give you up to 3 minutes. So if you have multiple questions, go ahead and ask them.
I'm asking a question. Are you guys all Brattleboro residents?
Noted your question. Keep going.
Okay.
We'll answer whatever questions we can at the end, if you would keep going.
No, that's it for right now.
Okay.
I'll come back if I have to.
Okay. Great.
You want to answer?
Yes. In order for us to be elected in Brattleboro, we must be Brattleboro residents. So, yes, every single person.
Because I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay. So, there's one.
Yeah. And then the parking discussion, I think that is a much longer discussion, and we don't have time.
No, I asked the cost. Why did we do that?
Yeah. So I can point you to where the video is of that meeting, several meetings, honestly.
But you can't tell me why.
I'm not going to summarize that right now because it's actually longer than we would have time for.
Are you the only one, or no? Anybody else going to speak about this? Or
they can speak on it if they wish.
Okay, so I'm not hearing anything from anyone else.
Yeah. Franz, would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, I'll say something quickly. I don't remember all the cost numbers, et cetera, and that information certainly is available, as Daniel was saying. But the bulk of it was paid for by outside funding. This was not something where we
get it started.
Well, to replace the meters with the kiosks specifically, that there was outside funding to cover that. I believe it was from the state, although, as I say, I don't remember all the details. But it wasn't something where we had to replace a perfectly functional system at our own expense. It was that there was funding available for us to do it.
Great. Thank you.
All right, so you're not going to answer.
Okay. Any other members of the public who wish to speak on something that is not on tonight's agenda? Sir. Yep.
Good evening, Select Board. So my name is Jester Jersey, and I'm a member of and spokesman of Brattleboro Common Sense. Thank you for allowing me to speak. So earlier this month, we saw the results of the national election. So how that affects the rest of the country and cities in between remains to be seen. But what I do know one thing, and that's the importance of the youth vote. Brattleboro and a handful of other cities across the United States have lowered the voting age to 16. So obviously it's important to hear what the young people have to say. And so I believe that as we see how the political landscape will be shaped in the next coming years, it is crucial and important to invest in the youth vote, whether it's to enable them to vote at the age of 16 in their municipal elections, as Brattleboro and other cities have done, or to select the people who are in their school board to represent them, or even to be a member of the school board, as Brattleboro had originally discussed and promised some years back. So I believe that it's important to have the young people engaged and involved in their local politics. This past weekend, I held an event called the Youth Vote Awareness Day just across the street, and I want to emphasize and highlight the importance of the power of the youth vote. And so I believe that cities like Brattleboro and other cities across the United States have lowered the voting age to 16 is also possible in the United States. And I think the Brattleboro folks who supported the amendment several years back that got the young people to vote today. And so what I also want to say is, in the spirit of thanks and the season of giving, I also want to give a special thanks to the people that made the event possible, including Ben and Jerry's Ice Cream for donating ice cream for the event and providing a grant. I also want to thank the Center Congregational Church for allowing us to hold the event at the parlor. And I also want to thank Brattleboro Community Television for documenting the event. And I just once again want to thank everyone in the Brattleboro community for supporting empowering young people across the United States and in your local city and in the state of Vermont. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, moving on. So the next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. John, could you just walk us through it?
Sure, Daniel. So we've got 7 items on the consent agenda tonight. If you approve this agenda, you'll be approving a parade permit for the Red Clover Rovers Turkey Trot to be held on Thanksgiving. You'll be approving a limited event permit for Winston Prouty's Bingo fundraiser scheduled for Friday, December 13th. You'll be approving the loan amendment for the Pleasant Valley Water Treatment Facility project. The funding for this project was split over several funding cycles, and this is the final adjustment to bring it in line with the full $14.5 million with subsidies that has been approved by the state's Water Investment Division. You'll be awarding a winter snow removal contract in part to Slate Rock Timber and one to Belco Excavation for various sites around town. You'll be approving the use of $7,000 of the Global Warming Solutions Fund to hire a structural engineer to look at the weight capacity on the roofs of Gibson Aiken and the library for the possibility of solar installations. You'll be approving the town to develop projects utilizing federal tax credits for future investments in renewable energy generation, electric vehicles, energy storage, and electric vehicle charging stations. And you will be approving the use of $15,000 from the town clerk's special restoration fund to finish a project to make Brattleboro's land records available online.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. Any select board members wish to pull any of those items for discussion at the end of our agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I motion that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, Peter's made a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. Okay, so the next item is new business, and our first order of new business is to announce committee vacancies. And if the board doesn't mind, I'll just go ahead and do that. Unless something has changed. Okay, wonderful. All right, so Brattleboro has a number of committees that are populated by folks like yourself, and without those committees doing their work, a lot of things in town wouldn't happen. So we are looking for people to fill vacancies on the following committees. The ADA Advisory Committee has 4 vacancies. The Arts Committee has 1 vacancy. The Conservation Commission has 3 vacancies. The Design Review Committee Alternate has 1 vacancy. The Development Review Board Alternate has 2 vacancies. The Energy Committee has 1 vacancy. Twice on there. The Fence Viewer, we have a vacancy in Fence Viewer. Nelson Withington Fund Advisory Committee has 1 vacancy. Senior Solutions Advisory Council has 1 vacancy. And we have a vacancy for a weigher of coal. And so anyone that is interested in learning more about those committees could be in touch with the town manager's office. Anyone who wants to submit an application for one of those can do so through the town manager's office or through our website. And that is that. Any of my fellow board members want to say anything about committees or any questions from the public about committees? Mr. DeGray, you have a question?
An inquiry.
Okay.
Dick DeGray, District 8. I was just wondering why the budget discussion because it's a continuing from a past meeting, is the last item on the agenda and not the first, as usually the protocol when we continue something.
It's a fair question. I can say that I didn't really think too much about that when we were making the agenda. If I wanted to justify it now, I could probably justify it by saying that the item is about reviewing open house feedback rather than simply just a continuation of our budget discussion. But we will pick up a budget discussion. So I think we'll get there pretty soon, honestly. Any other questions about committees? Seeing none. Okay, we're going to move on. So the Windham and Windsor Housing Trust are here to talk with us about their new exciting housing project in West Brattleboro. Elizabeth Bridgewater and Peter Paggi.
Close enough, yeah.
Yeah, what is it?
Paggi.
Okay, Paggi. Are here to present, and we have this amazing table for you to sit at. It has 2 chairs. Mostly as functional. So welcome. We're excited to hear your presentation.
Thank you. I'll wait till Pete. So thank you for having us tonight. I'm Elizabeth Bridgewater, the Executive Director of the Windham and Windsor Housing Trust, and I'm with my colleague Peter Paggi, who's our Director of Real Estate Development, and we're excited to share what we've been doing in preparing for the redevelopment of the Chalet property in West Brattleboro. So before we get into that, I just wanted to share a little bit of history about the property and how we came to acquire it, and then what our goals are in the redevelopment, and then Pete's going to walk through some more details about the project. So if you think back to 2020, there was a public health crisis, and the state and community really wanted to make sure that everybody had a roof over their head and wasn't experiencing the challenges of COVID while also experiencing homelessness. So the state made money available for a couple of different initiatives to address the needs of people experiencing homelessness. That included the motel program, but also they made some money available to nonprofits like the Housing Trust to acquire properties to develop more permanent housing for folks. The timeline to do that was pretty short. The genesis of even the idea at the state level was in June of that year, and we acquired the property in September and had 3 months to invest in the money that we got from the state. So we were really focused on safety upgrades and some energy efficiency upgrades. It was an incredibly modest investment, not the typical investment that we make when we redevelop a property. And so we opened the doors in January of 2021 and welcomed new residents there. Part of the reason why we were attracted to that particular property is because we knew that when the pandemic was over, there would be an opportunity to redevelop it and build more housing. There's 17 acres out there on the property. They're not all developable because of the landscape, the topography, the wetlands, in the existing structures, but there's a good amount of space to contribute to helping solve the housing crisis in Brattleboro and in Vermont. So when we first got started, we wanted to just articulate to ourselves and to the community what our overall goals were, and it really was to maximize the land, to build more housing, and to use this unique opportunity to meet a variety of housing needs, and not just one group. So right now, the group of people that are living at the Chalet include people that were there when we originally bought the property that actually still remain there, as well as the new folks that have moved in. And so we want to make sure that those folks have a place to live. Right now, the conditions are not the highest quality in town, just because it was already in pretty rough shape when we bought it. So we want to improve the living conditions on the property for the people that are currently living there. We want to expand housing opportunities in Brattleboro, which includes family housing, homeownership opportunities, and to meet the needs of the current residents. So those are really the 3 different goals that we had in terms of what type of housing we wanted to build. And then we started to engage the community to hear what their thoughts were around what they'd like to see on the property as we went through the redevelopment. So we engaged the residents that live there right now, as well as residents that live in the neighborhood. We invited municipal officials, really anybody that wanted to engage with us. And we had a series of community meetings on the property over a period of several months. And it was a bit of an iterative process to really figure out like what was important to people. And so we had a lot of really robust conversations, and it really came down to a couple really key points. And that was, in addition to expanding housing opportunities, which I think everybody was really excited about, and having a variety of options, improving the safety on the property, especially circulating. Right now, there's not a lot of, there's no sidewalks out there. The mover is on Route 9. It doesn't come up into the property, so people have to walk down South Street. So really tackling that issue of foot traffic in the neighborhood, increasing the accessibility overall, both within the housing, the new housing units that we're building, but also on the property itself. And then there was a lot of interest in maintaining the community space there. Many people have cherished memories of the Chalet building and the restaurant and different events that have happened there. And so really having a continued space for community gathering felt important to folks, both that currently live on the property, but also for people in the neighborhood. So that we took all that feedback and started to develop our conceptual site design. And so that's what we want to share with you tonight and show how some of the feedback that we got has been incorporated into that design. And so I'm going to turn it to Pete to take it from here.
Thank you very much. So this is our conceptual site design. It's still being kind of massaged and finessed, but this is what we are, in broad strokes, working towards. This will be a multi-phase construction project. The total unit count at the end of all phases of construction would be 70. That would be split up among 60 apartments and 10 homeownership units. We were originally envisioning duplexes for the homeownership units. We are looking at potential for single-family homes, however, due to some regulatory reasons. But I'll just walk through the site plan and go through each individual phase. So right now there are two driveways entering the property, an upper driveway and a lower driveway. The two are not connected. We are proposing using those same curb cut locations, but really formalizing the roads and developing a loop road around the property. The current access is pretty informal, comes into South Street at an angle, which can cause some traffic issues, both in terms of visibility and in terms of speed into and out of the property. So we are proposing straightening those entries and exits, so they're entering South Street more at a 90-degree angle, forcing a stop and a turn. But you would come into the property on this upper road on the one-way loop, past where the motel is right now. The motel wing of the building is right now. We are proposing a demolition of that wing due to its kind of tough, its ability to be used as a residential structure right now is tough because it's built into the hillside, so there's really no daylight on the uphill side. But you would come into a new construction townhouse building and a new construction apartment building, and a renovated chalet building. The main chalet building would remain, as Elizabeth stated, with the large banquet space on the third floor, which is actually ground level up here. We would also have a few apartments in there, and then maintenance and property management space in the basement level. Continuing down the road, you would go to the homeownership units, as I said, currently shown as duplexes, but we are exploring single-family home options. And then you would go to the back of the site with a 30-unit apartment building. That is actually phase one. That will be the first building constructed. The reason that is because, as I said, or as Elizabeth said, folks are currently living in the motel building. And if we were to demolish that, obviously we would want to move folks out temporarily before moving them back in. There is not enough rental stock in Brattleboro really to accommodate that temporary relocation. It would be an incredibly expensive endeavor and really practically speaking, we would have to get extremely lucky to hit, have the number of vacant units in town to accommodate those folks. So our plan is to build that first building in back, new construction in what's currently just an open field. We will then relocate folks from the motel wing to that new building, and then work on the rental portion of phase 2 up here. In between those, running somewhat concurrently with the first rental phase but trailing it a little bit would be the homeownership phase. So we do expect all units to come online, within about 1.5 to 2 years of each other. So this is not going to be a long drawn-out process, but it is going to be, as I said, a multi-phase construction project. And then working with the fire department, we've been working with them on the site design, having the loop road coming around to provide good fire access for them, good circulation for the fire department. In the first phase 1 building, as I said, it's 30 units, and it will house the permanent supportive housing program that currently exists on site. Offices, the groundworks will have offices on site. There will be community space in there and private meeting space for groundworks.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else you want to tell us?
Nothing at this point. We will be obviously going through a permitting process with the DRB in the coming months, and we'll be happy to answer any additional questions at that point when the site plan is a little more refined and our plans are a little more baked.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Peter. Questions from the board? Elizabeth.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for coming, Elizabeth, Peter. I applaud your desire to build more housing. It is, of course, desperately needed. And I also recall the days when you quickly got the money to rehab the space, and I know that you were on quite a time frame to do that. So I can understand that refurbishing these existing motel units is a need. I want to talk about really the contract you have with Groundworks for supportive housing, because I understand that this development is one of the top 10 of emergency service calls in the town, and I want to make sure that the development that you have now is serving the needs of the residents and not overburdening the municipal services. And so I would like to hear more about that, but I would also like some assurances that as you grow and increase your number of residents on this property, that care will be given to this, to the population as needed for supportive housing, and again that whatever is causing the high volume of calls to 911 for police at this location, the root causes for that will be addressed.
Thank you for bringing up those issues. One thing I can say is that in this redevelopment plan, we're looking at deconcentrating the number of folks exiting homelessness on the property. We don't know when exactly how many residents will be there when we finish the construction. There'll be a point in the pre-construction phase where we won't lease up any additional units, because we want to make sure that we have the right mix of folks going over to the new building. And we are under an obligation, both because of our mission, but also because of federal regulation, to offer anybody that's living on the property at that time a place to go. So in the initial transition to the new building, whoever's living there at that time will have the opportunity to go over to the new building. However, our long-term plan, as people naturally leave the property, is to rebalance and deconcentrate the number of people exiting homelessness in that location. I think what we have learned over the last few years is that the total number there exceeded the capacity to provide support. And I think that's pretty visible in the community, so we're very well aware of that. And that's one of the reasons why we're working to diminish the number of people that are exiting homelessness and match their needs with the level of capacity in the support community that's available.
Thank you.
Well, that's interesting because I didn't expect that you would be, I forget the word you just used, de-escalating, rather that the services would increase. So I just think that's an interesting calculation. Maybe you'd like to talk more about that.
You've been asked to speak up.
I'm sorry. I think you need to explain a little bit more that calculation for really low-income housing and the services that that population needs, rather than de-escalating that population. I would just think more services rather than less people.
Yeah, so the term is deconcentration. Yeah, not de-escalation. So I think it's somewhat of an experiment to have that 100% of folks exiting homelessness in a permanent supportive housing community. And I think what our experience has shown over the last few years is that that may not be the ideal mix. I think we've seen that. I agree that it would be great to have more robust services. We've had this property open for 4 years, and we've actually seen an ebb and flow in service capacity just based on staffing issues, labor issues, wages. You know, there's a variety of reasons why I think there's across the whole system in the supportive service community why there's challenges. And so I think based on what we're observing overall with the capacity that's available and what our experience has been, that we feel like deconcentrating the number of people in one location is the better choice.
Okay.
So I just have one more follow-up question. So then, how, like you contracted for a service provider, and then have to live with the challenges that they have in their agency for staffing and so forth. What kind of mandate can you have that there's a certain level of support available to this community?
That is a really good question. There is no mandate. We don't contract with Groundworks. We have a memorandum of understanding, and everybody comes to the program with their best intentions. And the staffing plan that was developed in the heat of the pandemic was more robust than what was actually available based on a number of factors. Many of it were just labor shortages. So I think we are in a continuous conversation about what are the conditions that'll make this program the most successful. And I think there's a variety of factors that we feel like we're heading towards. I am proud to say that in October there was one service call from the municipality, and it was for a wellness check. It's been pretty quiet there. We've already been making changes, and I think we're seeing some of the fruits of those changes come to fruition. So I don't want to pin it on one thing and not the other, and I certainly don't want to in any way diminish the efforts of our service partner, because they've come to the table with hard work and dedication and mission, and there are some things that have just been out of all of our control in terms of diminished capacity across the whole system. So I think I guess I would just reiterate that given all those factors, we just feel like a lower concentration of people in one location is a better choice than trying to beef up services. We've had 4 years of what this looks like, so we have quite a lot of lived experience with that. And as we move into the future, that's what we'd like to do.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks, Elizabeth. Any other questions from the board? Richard.
So, am I correct in assuming that Groundworks is the primary support service provider for this project? Are there any other organizations that?
So they're the on-site service coordinators, and that includes case managers and a site coordinator, and they also will coordinate other services that are in the community. So at any given time, there may be other service providers, but they're the main anchor provider in the community.
And they've determined, after looking at the scope of this project, that they have the capacity and the personnel to provide what is needed?
Yeah, we've actually talked that through with them in detail, and just even looking at the analysis of, we did somewhat of a regression analysis on what the number of, at any given time, what was sort of the average occupancy, and it was 15. So it ebbed and flowed over the years, but that kind of core anchor number was 15, and that is where we landed with Groundworks, that we would provide up to 15 homes. Now, again, when that moment comes, when the building comes online, it may be more than that because we have an obligation to provide an opportunity for everybody. But over time, our aim is to have up to 15 permanent supportive housing, homes available.
Implying that the bulk of the people there wouldn't need these kind of services?
I'm sorry, say that again?
So if it's only 15 people that need the services, so if there's 70 units, that means the bulk of the people that this project serves, really, you don't think are going to need those kind of support services?
Who knows what people need? Lots of things can happen in someone's life where they might need them, and it'll be great that they're there on site. But I guess what we're saying is there's a very particular way that permanent supportive housing works in the community and the way that people are referred to a housing opportunity, and that's through the coordinated entry system. And that's what we're committing to, is to set aside up to 15 of those homes for people coming through that process. So it's not to say that other people on the property may not have needs periodically, but that's what we're setting aside, if you will.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Other questions from the board? France?
Thank you, Daniel. Welcome. There's a little bit of an elephant in the room for me, which is that I wouldn't say I'm terribly knowledgeable, but I've heard stories, reports of a lot of drug use at the Chalet, also maybe other properties in town. And that's very concerning to me. And I don't know if you have, how you plan or think about addressing issues like that, how it fits into your, the overall scope of your services and ability to provide safety and security for your residents. And I just wonder if you could address that a little bit.
That's not an elephant. That's a primary concern that we have as well. I think everybody's aware that Brattleboro is experiencing a lot of challenges with drug trafficking. And it's not just on our properties, it's, on Canal Street, on Main Street. It's very visible in a lot of locations. We are experiencing some of that as well on our properties. And so it's actually something that we're very concerned about. We're addressing it in a couple of different ways. One is through a little more aggressive tenant selection policies. I think in the past, before the current conditions were in play, we had a more liberal tenant selection policy and took more chances. And I think we've just given the changing conditions in town, we're adjusting our tenant selection policy to address some of those changing conditions. So that's one way. The other is we're really excited about the direction that the Brattleboro Police Department is going in increasing their capacity to be more respondent. We've been meeting already for the last year with Assistant Chief Evans to share information, and we've had several of the officers come to meetings on our properties to talk to residents about what they can do, and to share information about how the police department works to address issues. So we're collaborating a lot with them to educate our residents and educate our staff. And as the department increases capacity through the BRAT team, we're working more closely with them. Yesterday we had a 2-hour meeting with the whole BRAT team and our entire property management department to both meet each other and talk directly to each other and talk about how we can collaborate to respond to issues when they arise. So those are some of the things that that we're doing to address that particular issue. It is really challenging. I won't sugarcoat it, but we are working diligently on those issues. I think the last thing I'll mention is, and I think a lot of people are aware of this, but if you're not, it's important to note that there's some state regulations that make it really challenging for us to address issues. And so at my collegial level, we're talking to each other about some very specific ways that we can lobby our state legislative delegation to change some of the regulations so that we actually have stronger tools at our disposal, and that we're targeting the no trespassing issue, because we don't have a lot of ability to no trespass people off our property right now, even if they're engaged in challenging behavior. If they claim they're a guest, that's how Vermont law works. So that's a challenge that we're facing and other property owners face. We're also looking at ways to expedite eviction if somebody is engaged in illegal activity that's really disruptive and disrupts the safety of other residents in the community and in the neighborhood. So those are kind of the two specific things that we're targeting at the state level to talk to our legislators about. And I would just encourage anybody who cares about this issue to learn about these two things and talk to your legislators about them, because we need to have a really strong voice on this issue in order to make some change. I think Vermont is an incredibly compassionate state, and our infrastructure was developed at a time when these conditions were not here. So we're sort of lacking in capacity, infrastructure, and regulation to address these things, and we need to catch up, and we need to catch up quickly. And Brattleboro is actually doing some really great work in this area, and I think can be a leading voice. So we applaud that work, and we're excited to collaborate. And we invite other people to collaborate with us, especially around these two legislative initiatives.
Great. Thank you. Let's go to the public. Members of the public with questions. And I will say this is funky and is weird, but I'm going to ask you to direct your question to me, and I will bounce it over there. With that being said, I will take Mark, and then gentleman at the back, and then Frick, and then Mr. Gray, and then we'll see where we're at. Yep, coming up. Mary, thanks.
Mark Younger, Brattleboro.
So if you could address the board, Mark. Thanks.
Yeah, Mark Younger, Brattleboro.
Hi, Mark.
Okay, my question one is, on a project like this, are you hiring local Vermonters to build this property? One. Two, are they getting tax breaks when building this? And if they are, what are we giving up as Brattleboro residents to allow them to build this? Two. Three, I heard, sidewalks and stuff going in. They want to change the direction of the road. What is that costing us as taxpayers? Is that part of this whole plan? And are we going to take over the plowing of this whole entire thing? And is that going to cost us? I'm looking at things as we pay way too much taxes. I love something like this, but it's getting to a point where the taxes are taxing the people that actually have houses out of having a house. So address that, please.
Great, thank you. You need me to restate any of this?
No, I got it. And this is a very common question that comes up, so I appreciate you bringing it up. It's people want to know what impact is it going to have on my pocketbook, right? And so I will say that the financing, that the majority of the financing for this project actually comes from private equity, not from tax dollars. And so that is usually in the form of a bank. And so that's where the bulk of the money comes from to build a project like this. In terms of the plowing, we will be responsible for plowing the road. It's not going to be a public road that Brattleboro takes responsibility for. That'll be part of our operating budget, and so that won't impact the town at all. And then a lot of people think because the Windham and Windsor Housing Trust is a nonprofit, that must mean we don't pay taxes, right? It seems like a natural conclusion that you could make, but it's actually not true. And the reason why is that when we build a new housing community, we actually create a separate entity that's a for-profit entity, and as a result, that for-profit entity pays taxes. So we're actually going to be contributing to the grand list in Brattleboro through this project, and I think our current projections for phase one is $33,000 in additional taxes to the town of Brattleboro. So while we won't be utilizing, plowing services or sanding on the roads, we'll still be contributing to the bottom line of the town budget.
Great, thank you. I don't know your name, I'm sorry, but I will learn it.
I'm Elias Burgess. I'm the Director of Programming at Turning Point of Windham County. Must this be phrased as a question or be appropriate to offer more of a statement?
Go for it and we'll see how we do.
Sure. Yeah. I just want to say that the supportive housing efforts have made a massive difference in the work that we do. Coming from a place of direct service, there are many people I've worked with who would probably not be around in one way or another without those efforts. So we're intensely grateful for that. And if there's anything we can do to provide more support on site, our off-site coaches already make weekly visits to the Chalet and to other supportive housing areas. We used to run meetings there. We would be happy to continue that or any other efforts. And if there's any coordination we can do with Groundworks or Windham Windsor to that effect, please let us know.
Great. Thanks, Elias. Thank you. Mr. Sprite?
Frank Sprite, District 9 Rep. We've got a couple of statements and a couple of questions. First of all, Liz, I want to commend you for talking about services. The places that have done the Housing First model successfully, not generally in this country, but elsewhere, make sure that they have extremely robust services, far beyond what we've seen in this country almost anywhere. I have not found a place which actually exemplifies it stateside. And so whatever we can do to make that better, I heartily encourage. I would, as a housing provider of many decades, I would like to say that having a mix may be a good idea, but in my experience, one disruptive household or individual can make life miserable for a significant number of people in a building or complex. So good luck with that. The Land Trust has, in the past, had problems really holding tenants accountable. I, as a neighborhood organizer, have experienced them continuing to house known drug dealers for years on Elliott Street. So I hope that is changing in a big way. The change in the composition of the complex makes me wonder what's the difference between the Land Trust and what the rest of us do, which is end up housing the occasional challenging tenant along with a bunch of relatively functional ones. That's, I guess, a rhetorical question. Legislation could improve the situation. I appreciate that being highlighted. I am curious if they can share the same concerns I have with how the judiciary is administering the laws that are already on the books. I think that's a huge problem. My questions. Cost per unit anticipated, and also is Land Trust expecting to bring us any requests for tax abatement or anything like that as they have in the past? And I'm hoping the board will address whether they're going to entertain such requests or not.
Okay, thank you. So a question about cost per unit and a question about, I don't know, tax stabilization or something like that. And then a premature request that the board make some kind of statement.
I'm going to ask you to talk about cost and how we develop our budget, but I do want to just answer one question that you sort of asked rhetorically, but I thought it was a good one, which is what's the difference between us and a private property owner, and are we doing the same thing? And I think there are some pretty stark differences in that we have a rent cap on our rents, and so we don't charge market rate rent. So that's one key difference. So we're at our core offering a more affordable rent than is available in the marketplace. In addition, there's some income qualifications that go with that. So we're serving a particular household mix that has incomes up to 60% of area median income, sometimes over that depending on what our funding mix is. So I think we're, while we are all part of the housing solution in Vermont, and I applaud private property owners for doing their part, and we work and support them with other programs that we have. This particular type of housing development is long-term permanent affordability, and that comes with lower rents and income restrictions. So that's the key difference. In terms of tax abatement, that's not what our expectation is. Our expectation is to actually contribute to the grand list. So, and like I said, in the first phase, our projection is around $33,000.
Great, thank you.
And then in terms of our project budget, we are still, as I said, we're still working on and finessing our site plan, so we don't have a final construction budget yet.
Okay, thank you.
No, at this point it'd be, no.
Mr. DeGray.
Thank you. First and foremost, I want to thank Liz and Franz for talking about the huge impact that the Windham Housing Trust properties are having on our police force. Liz was kind. I believe in the top 10, 3 or 4 of your properties are on that list. Having a pulse for your screening process to give someone a place to live is not a good screening process. Intermingling people, you're going to have families on this property, and I believe that you should be doing background checks. The potential for having pedophiles around kids at any of your properties without doing a proper screening process is a huge concern of mine, and a huge concern of mine throughout the state with the liberal policies that the state has for housing people. We need to do a better job at screening people. Obviously, the drug traffic in your properties is unbelievable, but just from my conversations with the people in the police department. I'm a little concerned about what you talk about taxes. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you are taxed at a different rate. Windham Housing Trust properties are taxed at a different rate than any other buildings in the municipality, and that your tax rate is set by the state, not by the Brattleboro, not by our tax rate. And you talked about $33,000 that you're going to contribute to the grand list. Is that at 100% assessment or the tax rate that you're set by the state legislature? Because, again, all of your properties, what you're not paying 100% is all the people that pay taxes are making up that delta. The difference is you're giving some affordable housing, which I support. what I'm really disappointed in the Windham Housing Trust is your lack of a screening process and what's gone on with your properties and the people that are living there. And to the detriment of the good tenants you have and to the public at large, I think, and what concerns me is something else that you said, that we should be in contact with the legislature. Our legislators should be here listening to what you're saying about the lack of rules that the legislature has in place for you to do evictions or for no trespassing. I mean, that to me should be a no-brainer. And I'm wondering why Emily Kornheiser and Molly Burke and our new elect Ian, have you had conversations with them about the issues that you're facing? Is a real concern.
Thanks, Dick.
So I will finish up. I really am concerned about this, and I hope that you had multiple meetings with the neighborhood up there to talk about your properties and how you're going to work with them to make sure that this doesn't fall in the same state as several other your properties in town. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Elizabeth, if you want to speak briefly to some of that, we're going to need to move on pretty shortly.
Yeah. First, I want to say, glad we have something in common in terms of wanting to talk to our legislators. Yes, we have had conversations, and we will continue to have conversations, not just with legislators in our region, but also at the state level. So last week I met with the new Senate Pro Tem Keisha Ram-Hinsdale and talked about these very issues. So we want to elevate it across the state as well, and not just talking with local Brattleboro legislators. I just want to address the tax question, because I saw a lot of heads nodding as Mr. DeGray was talking. Our properties are taxed on what they're valued at, and they're valued lower than private owned properties because our rents are lower. Our rents are actually capped by the state and by the federal government, so we can't generate the same level of revenue that somebody that owns a private property can generate. And therefore, the property itself is valued lower. There's a valuation that's based on income. And because our properties generate less income, those valuations are lower. So when people say, oh, your properties are taxed lower than everybody else, there's actually a rationale for that, and that's because their values are lower. So I just wanted to clarify that as well.
Great. Helpful. Thank you. And thank you. I'm not going to get into a back and forth. We're going to go to Mary Casey and then Mariah, and then we'll move on.
Hi, folks. Thank you, Daniel. I also am concerned about our failure to grow our grand lists adequately to provide all of the services we're trying to provide. The Housing Trust is trying to improve our housing stock and trying to improve its screening of its tenants. Unfortunately, they are consuming a lot of services, such as police services, that we can't afford any longer. You know, I don't know if the Housing Trust is aware, we're looking at a 22% increase to our property taxes. And the private homeowner on full market value is now paying over $3,000 per $100,000 of value. And we're looking at a 22% increase. So bringing this back to the Housing Trust, I like actually the mixed types of housing you're hoping to bring. One type you mentioned was private home ownership. Well, at least those properties and that portion of your property be valued at 100% of its fair market value. So we get some portion, you know, your first 40 units, when you say 33,000 to the in taxes, any increase to the taxes is great. But 40 units at 33,000 doesn't get us out of our budget crunch. So at least with the private ownership, will that come on at 100%? Thank you.
All right. Yeah, if you'd address that last question.
Sure. So the homeownership opportunities that we're creating through this project are going to be shared equity home ownership opportunities. Our mission is to actually build affordable housing. So we're not building market rate housing. That's not our mission. That's a mission of the private community. And so all of those home ownership opportunities will be shared equity homes, and they will have a permanent affordability restriction on them. It basically offers the incoming homeowner an opportunity to buy a home where they might not be able to afford one, and then it keeps it affordable for successive generations going forward.
Great, thank you. We're going to go to Mariah, and then we're going to need to move on.
Hi, thank you. My name is Mariah Carney, and I'm from Brattleboro. Housing is definitely a need in our community, and I think we've all said that. The one thing I'm concerned about is that this property is so close to Academy School, where there's 350 students, and there's also a preschool program that has another 20 students. And these students play in the forest every day. And I haven't heard you say anything in regards to safety that makes me feel as a parent that my child is going to be safe when they're playing in the woods. You did make a couple of comments that things were out of your hands related to drugs and evicting people. But I'm a firm believer in proactive versus reactive solutions. And I would really like to hear any of your thoughts that you have in regards to safety of the children when it comes to adding 70 more units in this spot. Thanks.
Yeah. Good questions. I didn't say that evictions were completely out of our hands. I said that Vermont makes it challenging to move quickly. So I don't want to be on record as saying that we don't have any way to address that. Regarding working with the school and there's a sort of forest playground corridor that abuts the property. When we bought the property, we met several times with the principal and the assistant principal there, and created an open communication. There were some issues that came up early on that we addressed pretty quickly, and the principal has been engaged in coming to these meetings, has expressed to me, and I think publicly at these meetings, that she's really excited about the opportunity. We are going to build some homes that are family size appropriate, and there's a lot of excitement, I think, from the school folks that there'll be families right in the neighborhood that can access the school. We actually haven't had a lot of safety complaints around the forest corridor or even on the school property, besides a few things that came up early on in 2020. So, and Kelly and I have a pretty good open communication. So I think if there was an issue, I would have heard about it, but we actually haven't really had that as an issue, and I don't think we would expect that to continue to become an issue. But if there is something that comes up, we'll address it quickly, as we have already with school officials.
Okay. Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks, Peter. Thank you for your presentation. Thanks to folks for their questions. We look forward to hearing more about this project. So thank you. We're going to move on to our next item, which is solid waste, a program decision about what to do. And I think Patrick Morland is going to make a lovely presentation to us.
Well, thank you. Lovely. I'll try and keep it lovely. So good evening, everybody. Patrick Morland. There is a memo in your backup for this meeting this evening on page 52 of the backup. That memo starts with a sort of a recitation of all the meetings that have taken place in this room at select board meetings over the course of the year, including as attachments all the previous memos that have been distributed to the board, starting with the February 8th memo discussing procurement, followed by the April 11th memo that discussed our initial meetings with Casella and some issues that were raised, issues like automated collection, pay-as-you-throw, large item collection, etc. Moving on to the June 13th meeting, where we discussed the outcome of a variety of different public engagement efforts that have been undertaken, including a community survey online, along with public focus groups that were hosted in our offices here. Moving on then to the October 8th memo from last month, wherein we described the two main choices available to the board, one which includes trash services and one which excludes trash services. And so we think we're in position this evening to ask the board to make this sort of high-level scope of services decision today about whether to include trash services or not in the curbside collection program. And with that decision, we think the administration is in position to finalize and execute a 5-year agreement with Casella for the curbside collection program as it gets defined for the downtown public trash can and recycling cans and for all municipal facilities beginning January 1 of 2025 with a planned transition to automated collection that would occur on or about January 1 of 2026. I also want to highlight that there is an attachment which is sort of a chart of options on page 72. There are included in here options A and B that we discussed at some length last month. There are also options C and D. These are other options that have been on the table and part of our discussion with Casella for the last 6 or 8 months. They involve weekly collection as opposed to every other week collection. Accordingly, each one is substantially more expensive than the A or B option that we considered last month. We wanted to include them here just to show a little bit more of the full scope of options that have been considered in our discussions with Casella, but largely due to their additional cost above options A and B, we're not recommending those. We just provide them here to give a little context of a more full context of the range of options that have been considered. Staff is recommending that the board take a look most closely at options A and B. A is the option that does not include trash. There is an option within that, as the board I'm sure will recall, for a franchise opportunity. And then, of course, there's option B, which is the option that includes something more similar to the program as it exists today, where there is a one-to-one relationship between the town and the vendor, and it covers trash, recycling, and organics. I think I'd like to skip ahead to staff's recommendation, which is option B, the fuller and larger contract. I think one might take a look at that and say, well, this is 1.3 million as opposed to 941,000. This is a more expensive contract. Is this something we should be undertaking? And I guess what I would say, and it's hopefully clear in the memo, that while the more expensive contract, option B, would grow the general fund budget to a larger degree, it actually represents a better value to the community of households that are eligible to participate in the curbside collection program. And the reason I say that is because if you were to take a look at the franchise price, which is itself an improvement upon just the free market, it comes to about $320 a year per household. Times 4,300 households, that's somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.3 million. And if you take a look at the combined cost for trash collection in option B, the collection is $320,000 and the disposal is about $220,000. They combine for about $540,000, which is 60% less than if the community is forced to pay for their own trash collection to a vendor and excluding the town. So for that reason, we see the larger contract, while it does grow the size of the grand list and does so in a year which is really inconvenient, it's actually saving many of the households more money than were we to avoid trash collection. So the recommendation coming from staff is for us to, for the board to consider options B, but obviously the choice is yours.
Thanks, Patrick. Board members, Anyone want to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion.
Elizabeth?
I'll move to...
It's a little quiet, Liz.
Okay. I'm finding the motion. I move to authorize the town manager to finalize and execute a 5-year contract with Casella Waste Systems, Inc. for solid waste collection and disposal services for the curbside collection program, the downtown public trash and recycling cans, and for all municipal facilities to begin January 1, 2025, consistent with option B as presented.
Great. Would you like to speak to it? You don't have to.
Well, you know, what I was intending to say was very much in line with what Patrick just said, which is that option A is really a false option. And in voting for option B, I understand that while option A may appear to be cheaper, it is ultimately more expensive for the householders. So we're adding to the budget, but in the best interests of the householders in Brattleboro.
Great, thank you. Other board members? Richard?
Can I amend that, or do we need a discussion on this first?
You can if you want to.
All right, well, what I would like to suggest an amendment to that, and it relates to the issue of how much waste we're going to generate. And because under the Plan B, so far what we've looked at, we would eliminate the bag system. But what I would like to see, based on discussions that have been had with the people that sell us the bags, is that the possibility exists that we may be able to use the bags with the Casella system, which is something we'd have to deal with after we implement the first phase of this. It's getting complicated. But
I keep going.
Okay.
I have a thought, but keep going.
It's very. There are communities that have used the add-on of the bags with the buckets, and they have been able to have a minimal increase in their waste stream. But what we're looking at is the possibility of an increase of about $200,000, is what I understand, if the generation of trash increases the way that Casella thinks it might with the buckets. So what I'm saying is we could possibly save a lot of money and also be more environmentally responsible by trying to figure out if we can have a combination of trash buckets and the bags.
Okay. I'm going to say that what the board has in front of them tonight is a decision to make a contract either for trash or no trash collection. And the question of bags is something that we can consider, on another night. We can have the administration speak with the people that you're talking to and learn more about that. But what's before us tonight is, do you want to have a contract that includes curbside trash pickup or not? And so I don't think we need to amend that motion.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to get that on the table as something to explore.
Yeah. Peter?
Yeah, just a clarifying question. So let's say we were to adopt the $1.3 million option. Is what you're suggesting, and again, with the understanding of what Daniel just said, and it's really not in play, but I'm just clarifying. So we adopt this gets passed into the general fund, which gets passed on to the taxpayer. Are you further proposing that we still continue to charge those people for bags over and above their cost of their taxes going up? So in other words, you still pay $2 for a purple bag, $1 for a yellow bag, on top of your already tax increase?
I believe that would be the case, but what the trade-off is that the possibility exists that we could decrease our costs by $200,000.
We could. Yeah, but all those people would be feeling that.
The towns that have had this combination.
That's just pouring vinegar in a wound.
Well, we don't know what I'm looking at is saving money, basically. I think there's saving money and decreasing the waste stream. And that possibility exists, even though people might have to pay a little extra for the bags.
Okay, thank you.
I don't respectfully don't disagree, but it's like
maybe down
it's
the road.
not on the table for me.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. I think it's important to recognize that like the bags are intended to be a sort of financial kind of disincentive to produce trash, and so when you remove the bags from the system, there's the possibility, and Casella spoke to this in some of their presentations, that we may actually, well, they didn't speak to it because of bags, they spoke to it for other reasons, but we may see an increase in trash, and that would lead to an increase in costs for trash disposal. And so, I think that's something for us to consider. I think the question before us tonight is, do we want to have a contract that provides for a trash pickup at all or not? And we can figure out some of that other stuff further down the road. So I'm going to go to Franz and then Liz.
Thank you, Daniel. I've got a couple of questions that I think Patrick can probably answer fairly easily, or at least could discuss a little bit. First of all, on the chart of all the different expenses on page 72, the figure under option B for the disposal of trash is $220,740. Now, that applies to the actual dumping of the trash at the landfill, which also is called a tipping fee often. So that tipping fee of $220,000, is that based on the current estimate of our current trash volume, or does that include a factor for the predicted increase in trash volume that was just discussed here? I mean, what's that number likely to really be if there's, for example, no pay-as-you-throw element in the system?
I can answer it. It's the high option. So there was two options.
Okay.
And that is the high one.
Thank you. And what was the other option?
110.
Okay, so that's a doubling of our trash volume.
So it's
effectively
a conservative estimate. Hopefully, we'll come in way lower than that.
Let's ask Patrick, because I think he's going to tell us why. If he doesn't, I know the answer.
Daniel's absolutely correct. As presented in this particular chart, we showed the high option because we really don't know 100% for sure, and this is what we believe to be the sort of upper end of what could happen. But there was something you said that I'd like to speak to just a little bit, which was if we don't do pay-as-you-throw. And what I think is important to say to that is we're going to do pay-as-you-throw regardless of how we roll out the coming trash program. So using a bag system is one method of pay-as-you-throw. Pay-as-you-throw is a easy way to describe the requirement that the state has put upon us that we pay for the collection and disposal of garbage using variable rate pricing depending upon either weight or volume. And so whether we use bags or whether we use carts, we're going to employ pay-as-you-throw. The question is really how. And so over the course of the summer, as we were going through discussions with Casella and talking with the board, at one point in time, for example, we took a look at carts. And there was a really giant cart, something like 96 gallons, I think it was. And then there was a smaller cart, and then there was yet even a smaller cart. And so it meets the requirements of the law, or pay-as-you-throw, if we provide a base level of service, and that service is going to be focused on the smallest level cart. Now, if a particular household exceeds the amount of trash that they can fit in their cart, then they're going to need, for example, an additional collection. And it will be upon the household to contract for that additional collection with Casella. And so if there's more trash being generated at a given location, they're going to be paying more than somebody who's able to make use of the cart that's provided. That's also another way to deliver pay-as-you-throw.
Thank you.
I need to have a little conversation about this with Patrick. So yes, Patrick, I understand that there is this technically legal pay-as-you-throw method that would be based on cart size or number of carts or something like that. What I'm really questioning is whether that's likely to be an effective mechanism for limiting people's trash volumes or not. My feeling about it is that the carts are capacious enough that there's really going to be no day-to-day incentive for the trash disposer, i.e. me, to say, oh, I'm going to recycle this or reuse this or something because I'm not buying bags, I'm not seeing that effect coming out of my pocket in real time. So yes, I think what you're saying is absolutely accurate in terms of are we legally meeting the definition of pay-as-you-throw, but I think I don't know, but I think we need to look at the question of whether we can do a better job of limiting our trash volumes through this additional method or some other additional method. I'm not married to the bags in particular. I like them, but anyway, I'm really saying we need to have this discussion. I don't think we need to have it right now tonight. I think it's good that Richard put it on the table as a concern, and I hope that people in the audience will have concern and voice their opinions on this. But I think some additional pay-as-you-throw method would be really great to try to lower us from the $220,000 estimate to the $110,000 estimate.
Great. Thank you. Patrick?
Yes. I appreciate what your point. The only thing that I would like to add, I think is important, is what you seem to be saying is there enough incentive to reduce for the individual household to reduce what they're throwing in the garbage as opposed to recycling or some other method. Could there be additional motivations that we come up with? Possibly. But I think probably the best one is one that we're planning to provide, which is there's no question we're providing recycling service. That's got another cart. It's right here. And we would be providing weekly organics collection. So the two diversion efforts that are most impactful for reducing what needs to go into trash are being made available to every participating household. And I think one of the things that will be important once we have defined an implementation program to be determined in the near future and come up with a public education campaign is for people to recognize that throwing something in the garbage is a very costly way to dispose of that item. If it can at all go into the organics collection, that's going to save us about, rough calculation, about $40 a ton. So every ton of organics that gets recycled and recycled here locally is going to save us from the cost of having to throw that material, whatever it may be, into the landfill, which is a far more expensive thing to get rid of.
Great, thank you.
So let's another independent question at some point.
Okay, you want to ask it right now?
Yeah,
and then I'll move on to someone else.
How did we settle on 5 years for the length of the contract? I think we had some discussion that it might be like 3 years, and I don't remember the details of advantages and disadvantages.
The advantages and disadvantages, well, we've been negotiating with Casella now for months. We know that they need to acquire new machines, and we know that the number of years that they amortize the cost of those machines is a challenge for them. They've asked for a 5-year contract. A 5-year contract is consistent with, it's actually shorter than what we've had in recent years, and so it seems reasonable.
Okay, thank you. Other board members? Liz? And then Peter.
First, my first point is that the increased tipping fees are, from my understanding from our discussions over the summer, were based on people who are presently not using the bag system, and that they will then use our regular trash system when we don't use the bags.
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
Yes.
So rather than not using the bags causes more trash, it's because not using the bags allows people to use our system, and they're currently not, and that will create
and there's
increased
ways to get
tipping system.
around our current system, and that's what we're learning has really been going on.
Right. Okay. And then I just want to say a word about this continuance of the bag system. You know, the bag people are contractors that contract with our town presently, and they work with town staff, and we're told that the bag system would probably be eliminated. At that point, then, these contractors contacted each select board member, and we're continuing to advocate for their position. I don't think that we should be negotiating with these people absent town staff. And I think that we should be relying on the town staff and their negotiation and their understanding of this process rather than what I consider to be an end run from the bag contractor into this process.
Okay. Peter?
Yeah, so a lot to unpack here, right? I think through our meetings with Casella, what we've discovered is when we move to an automated system, there will be no person touching these containers. They will be lifted up, nobody will see them, they'll dump into the truck, and it's gone. So I do have some concerns, to your point, of people not using our recycling and our composting properly, that it'll just become this kind of homogenized mess of stuff that gets dragged in, and we pay this larger tipping fee. So that's my concern. I don't have a suggestion on how to control that. I know that when pay-as-you-throw came up many years ago, how long have we been living with that, 15 years now, ish, that I was not a big fan of having to pay to throw my garbage away on top of paying my taxes, but I did quickly see the benefit of reducing the amount of trash and controlling the amount of trash that went into our landfills and how important that was. And I changed my tune a little bit about it. And now I dump a $2 bag every other week out by the curb, and that's been working out well. I think that if we move forward on this, unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot of faith in people continuing to sort that out. And I'm a little sad about that. I wish people would still continue to kind of compost and recycle and do that as normal. I think some will. I think, unfortunately, most will just get lazy around it, like not wanting to walk it over to the recycling bin in their closet and just throwing it in the trash can because it's right there because nobody's going to see it, and it's going to dump in. What's my point? I don't have one. That's just a little soapbox speech that, as we're unpacking this, that I think we have to actively think about. I understand your point about the pay-as-you-throw. I don't agree with passing an additional expense to dump your garbage over and above what we're paying, what we're proposing here, on to already overtaxed taxpayer. So, no solution, just a bunch of statements.
Thanks, Peter. I'm going to speak my mind on this matter, if you don't mind. So, first things first, our old contract with Triple T was a great deal, and that is in the past. When I first learned of the kind of prices that we were looking at for these new contract options, that was pretty rough. And especially, as Patrick kind of alluded to, within this particular budget cycle, especially rough. So that's in the past. That's just not an option for us. We can't somehow go back to that old contract. So what we have are some options. And so option one is a contract that is twice as much as our old contract, but no longer provides for trash service for people in this town. And I can say that I think that would be a terrible deal for people in Brattleboro. And there are folks in the community that are saying to me, well, I'll be fine because I can truck my stuff to the solid waste district every Saturday, and that'll be a delight for me, and I'll save some money. And that's fine for those people. But that is not all who lives in this town. There are elderly people, there are disabled people, there are people with very, very busy lives, who don't have the time or the means, in some cases, to be paying for a dump sticker, paying for the gas that gets them to the dump, paying for the time, and paying for their bag disposal fee as well. So whilst it looks like a cheaper option compared to the full service option, it does pass on costs, and it passes on inconvenience, and it passes on inequity. And so I'm not in favor of us pulling out of providing a trash option to folks in this town. So that leaves us with this other option. And I had to make peace with the price of it. And I've only recently done so. One of the things that you'll see on page 72 is a estimated cost, because this is no longer going to be paid for by you paying for bags at the grocery store. It'll be paid for out of your property taxes. And so your property taxes are based on the assessed value of your home, right? My home is assessed at about $160,000. It's a modest little home. It's just me and my wife. We put out a yellow bag about once every 6 weeks. A yellow bag is, what, $2? I have to buy, 9 containers of bags in order to meet my trash needs. I would also need to pay $60 for a sticker. So my total trash expense for my household, and not every household is my household, would be $105. The total cost based on the assessed value of my home is $123. You put those two together, it comes to $228 a year for my solid waste service. The comparable cost in option B for my household comes to $181. Okay, it is cheaper based on assessed value. And then I want to speak about what is actually available in the free market. I have a friend who recently moved to Vernon. Vernon no longer has a municipal trash service. She contracted with Franklin. It costs $50 a month. That is $600 a year. So yes, our old contract was much more affordable. Yes, it was a good service. I appreciate all the years that we had that contract. That is no longer an option. Here are our two options. And because of that, I am choosing that we should have as full a service as possible for all of the people that can use this service. And that will be tough for our budget this year, but it is the right thing to do. Peter.
Yeah. So one other further clarification that I've always thought as I was looking over this thing, and please correct me if I'm incorrect. So in our current, the sweetheart deal that we have now, which is, to Daniel's point, exactly spot on. If you look down the FY25 budget and you see how our current rate of what we were being paid, and then it backs out $300,000 out of the grand list, out of the general fund budget, but that is still money that is being paid by the taxpayer in some shape or form. So, I mean, that number should really reflect, if we're being honest, additional $300,000, and be like closer to $800,000.
Right, like out of the pockets of.
Right. So, I mean, if we're continuing to dig now, I also understand I mean, some people might not opt for that, but so I always felt that was just a little bit misleading, and that should be a larger number. And it doesn't, it doesn't really quite half what we have now. It's a little bit better, but I'm with you. I mean, I think we have to do something like this, because I'm in agreement. I'm confused by it, just as everybody at this table is, and it, as Patrick said earlier, it comes at a pretty inconvenient time in our budget.
Okay, thank you. Franz.
I'm not confused.
No, I'm not confused. Franz and then Richard, and then we're going to go to the public.
Thank you, Daniel. So I would like to address some of the questions that Liz raised about the pay-as-you-throw system and how that discussion came about, which is indeed the company that provides the pay-as-you-throw bags came to my office hours last Friday and told me what they had to say. I don't know if they had discussions with the town staff in advance of that, but I don't think so. And I didn't solicit them to come talk to me. I meet there with office hours for everybody. was not trying to do an end run around anyone. However, I did have a very interesting discussion that led me to think we needed to talk about this more and that we needed to get the town staff involved in the discussion so we could sort through some of these ideas. And in that vein, I would point out the notion that our trash volume is going to go up because there are people who haven't been using the bag system and now they're going to be using the cart system. Well, that's possibly true, but the only source of that information we have is from Casella. And maybe there's other people, knowledgeable other people, who have a different point of view. They may even have some evidence that in places that have maintained a pay-as-you-throw system, when switching to a mechanized cart system, actually have not seen the increase in trash volumes that we're projecting. We're projecting a doubling of our trash volumes here. That's bad. And if there's a way to counteract even part of that, I think we should take a look at it. That's all I'm suggesting, is that we should not have a pre-drawn conclusion as to which would be better, continuing bags or discontinuing bags, or coming up with some other pay-as-you-throw system. But I think if there's a chance that we can save significant money that way, we need to look at it, and that's what I would advocate. You know, Daniel, you also made a comment there that under the new system we won't have bags just a moment ago, and I think maybe we wouldn't, maybe we would. We need to look at it and think about it and have some solid projections on that.
Okay, and I just want to say that if we want to have the administration be in touch with those folks and learn a little bit more, that's fine. It sounds to me like, given that what you're talking about is trash bags, is that you want a contract that includes trash.
In terms of tonight's decision, yes.
Right.
In fact, I do. And I'm planning on voting in favor of Liz's motion.
Yes.
I'm addressing what comes after that.
Very good. Richard, and then the public.
I just want to make it clear, I don't care whether we have bags or not. My intent is, if we can decrease the amount of trash we throw and save some money, that whatever works is fine. But what I really want to say is that everything we've said so far, beyond looking at option B, we're sort of guessing. Nobody really knows how this is going to play out to a large degree in terms of volume, things like that. You know, they're educated guesses. What I would suggest is we try Plan B for a year, and we keep very close track of all the numbers. I think you have to see what happens before you do anything else. I think keeping it simple now without anything else and just seeing what happens for a year is a reasonable way to go.
Mm-hmm. So the motion is for a 5-year contract, and we would be Patrick, we would be entering into a contract with them for the full suite of services, right? And so I don't think it would be appropriate, but please correct me if I'm wrong, to say that we'll do a contract for 1 year and then we might want to pull trash out. Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
No.
I'm just saying we just look at the numbers after a year and see where we're at. Okay. And then if it appears that we really increased the trash stream significantly, to think maybe
to ways to reduce the
there may be ways to reduce
it is in everyone's interest to have as low a tipping fee as possible because that impacts everybody's property tax rates.
So just to keep an eye on it, basically, is what I'm saying.
Very good. So whoever's on the select board next year, please do that.
We'll keep an eye.
Thank you. All right. So let's see who from the public wishes to speak. And I'm going to go to some people that I haven't heard from just so far this evening. So let's go to, is it Mary? Yes. Mary, then Tim, then Amanda, then Tom, then Ken, then, oh my God, I don't remember. Anne. Hi, Anne. Okay, great.
Mary Del Priori again. So just to clarify, so with the $1.5 million contract.
Hey, Mary, could you
here instead of Patrick?
Direct it to me?
Okay.
Yeah.
That includes the amount for large volume tipping. We're paying for that, assuming it's a larger volume of trash that we're dumping, moving to the system. But Patrick said the families would get the smaller bin, and if we had more than one bin, then we would have to pay extra. So why am I paying in my taxes for the large amount of tipping, right, the large amount of dump, but I get the smaller canister and then have to pay extra or pay for bags I just want to say when we're talking about the overall budget here, when we're talking about affordable housing, increasing our taxes steps us away from affordable housing. When we're talking about crime, a crime or drugs or violence in our street is also a symptom of our community, right? It's the health of the whole community. So as we, citizens who already had our taxes raised, right, from the state and from the town back in July, are now looking at additional taxes, you need to see that that's stepping away from affordable housing, and it could promote more ill health and ill activity in our town. So, and this trash question is a huge part of that. So, the inequality of paying for more and getting less, and the overall concern.
All right. Patrick, are you able to speak to that question about the tipping fee and why we chose to go for that higher number and why we're giving them smaller containers?
So, still don't have a precise calibration of exactly how much we should anticipate trash volumes growing. But I think we've known for a number of years that there are certain households for which the current program hasn't been a really good fit. And I'll give you an example. A household that has diapers, whether it be with children or elderly parents or something along those lines, waiting for an every other week trash collection when you've got a bucket full of diapers is it's a solution. Our program is a solution that doesn't adapt well to that type of environment. And so given the current program, right, that requires one to, go to Price Chopper or Hannaford's or something like that and purchase a bag, you could choose to not do that, right, and instead to contract with some other company to come and get your trash and have them pick it up once a week or twice a week if you wanted to. There are a good number of households that have made that decision for themselves and are operating effectively outside of the current program at their own expense. There's a difference also between, let's say, the specificity that was required given the contract with Triple T versus the contract that we're going to execute with Casella. With Triple T, they were asked to drive down the road and pick up residential garbage, right? And so they were never given a specific list of addresses, right? Stop at this address and then this address and then this address and then this. Don't stop at this address and then pick up at this address. And so Triple T was at a bit of a disadvantage to really understand who's eligible for this service and who isn't. And so that gave a lot of folks the opportunity to operate outside of the system. With the automated collection, right, there's these somewhat expensive carts that need to be provided to eligible households and not to ineligible locations, commercial properties, for example. And so in order to be able to say, stop here and here and here, don't stop there, stop here and here, we are going to go through a process together whereby we determine eligibility and assign a cart or series of carts to that location. Because of that, there's not going to be the opportunity to say, hey, you know what, there's a cart here that's in front of my house that's been given to me by the town, and I could use it and put garbage in it, but I'm going to choose to operate outside of that because I find it to be more convenient. I don't think that's likely to happen nearly as much in the coming program than has happened in the previous program. Okay. And for that reason, we believe trash volumes are going to increase. Exactly how much, we do not know.
Thank you. Who is next? Tim.
Hi, folks. Tim Wessel, District 9, RTM member. I want to first acknowledge to all you folks up there that it's a really nice time not to be on the select board. So I appreciate your service. I would like to just ask a procedural question real quick, a favor, and then two real quick questions. The procedural is, could you repeat the motion? because it's been so long that we all out here watching probably too would love to hear exactly what you're about to vote on.
Yes,
if you're voting.
I'll do it. It's right in front of me. So Liz made a motion to authorize the town manager to finalize and execute a 5-year contract with Casella Waste Systems Incorporated for solid waste collection and disposal services for the curbside collection program, the downtown public trash and recycling cans, and for all municipal facilities to begin January 1, 2025, consistent with option B, which is the option that includes trash pickup.
Okay, so everyone's familiar with those annoying AI, summaries of discussion. So my AI summary of that is that you really are going to be voting on a decision for the 5-year contract and the vendor, correct?
Yes.
And switching from every week trash service and every other week recycling and composting?
We'll have every other week trash and recycling and weekly composting.
Okay, so
So
composting
the
stays the
difference
same.
would be recycling's every 2 weeks instead of every 1 week.
Personal comment, the recycling moving to 2 weeks is kind of a logistical nightmare in my family. We do a lot of recycling every week, but doesn't get to my question. My quick questions were, what's the rush? Number one.
Keep going. Yeah, 2 questions.
Sure,
right?
sure. Well, it's sort of dependent on the answer to that question, but I'll give it a go. The next question is, if there isn't an immediate rush, in other words, can we continue a few more months with Casella as we currently exist? And indeed, it seemed like it wasn't going to kick in until 2026 anyway, if that was correct. Did I hear that?
I hear what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
My real question is, second question is, has it been explored to try to, for lack of a better term, groom a different company to become better supplied to service our town? In other words, we have a lot of good enough rubbish comes to mind for me. Family-owned company, local company. It would be kind of great to partner with someone else who could bid competitively with Casella. But maybe for the lack of capacity, they wouldn't have been interested. We, as a town, have recently been pretty free with our program income. Could we use a boost using some of that grant money to put a hometown company in a position to be able to bid?
Okay. I can address one of the things that you said. So going to the recycling, I think that the size of the recycling container that we're going to provide is larger than the one that we currently provide. And so it will be more accommodating of holding 2 weeks worth of recycling. I don't know. Obviously, every household generates different amounts. Patrick, are you able to speak to the kind of urgency here and then address Tim's kind of like, isn't this supposed to kick in January 1, 2026? Because it was in the memo, and I understand where you're coming from, and I think it's easily addressed.
So let's see, the urgency. I would describe the urgency this way. Our contract with Triple T expired June 30th. And we have been operating on a handshake, month-to-month agreement that Casella has been willing to participate in. Their timeline for that is not to exceed 6 months. So that's coming to an end December 31st, which is why the contract would be executed on July 1, 2025, with a planned transition to automated collection within the contract term to begin 1 year later. And part of the reason for having that be a year out is when they order trucks, they got to deal with the same supply chain issues that any of us deal with in ordering large-scale equipment, in that you order it today and hopefully you get it a year from now.
Great. Thank you. John,
and
you want to speak?
just, Patrick, you misspoke and said the contract would start July 1st, but it would actually start January 1st, I think.
Forgive me if I said that.
I understood that, yeah.
My words come out funny.
I think next was Amanda.
My first time doing this. I'm very excited. My name is Amanda Ellis Thurber. I'm West Brattleboro. I am coming with the lens of a more rural part of our district. We have some roads in West Brattleboro that are dead-end roads, very steep, very tight overhead canopy, and I'm just wondering, what have the conversations been with Casella regarding rural roads, dirt roads, big storms, and the automated truck? And is it more than just the automated truck?
Thanks. Patrick, you able to speak to any of that?
Not particularly. The discussions with, this is a town with many paved roads and many dirt roads, and we collect household solid waste at all locations, all residential locations in Brattleboro. So that includes each of the dirt roads, and so I'm not really sure what the discussion hasn't differentiated the more rural parts of the town to the more urban parts of the town.
Thank you. John wants to say something.
Oh, and just to add to that, Patrick, so some conversations have been along the lines of that certain areas they might need a chase truck or some different method in order to cover the town. I think they'll be working that out, but they'd like to do the automated collection as many places as they can manage. So.
But that's included in the contract.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not an addition.
Mark, I see your hand. I don't know if you remember. A while back I said we were going to go this person, this person, this person, because they hadn't spoken. So Tom, I think, was next.
Thank you.
And then if my memory serves, Anne was after Tom.
Tom Franks, Brattleboro resident. I sent the select board a note last week and town staff and recommended option 1A. I've changed my mind. I like option B, but the reasons I recommended option 1A were to a large part not addressed at all by option B. And the two things that they are in particular are, I used a highfalutin term in my memo. I'll spare you that. But the option B right now disconnects people, aside from having to get another trash container, but up to the size of the trash container. They are not connected with the decisions, the consequence of their decision to throw trash away. The other problem I have with option B is that I'm a big fan of user fees. If I make trash, I feel like I should pay for it. I should clean up my own mess. I mean, I think maybe we haven't done this in years, but they used to do it in school. Kids would have to carry around a bag with all their trash for a week. And it really had an impact on how, they're thinking about trash. I want to just a quick question to Patrick. The size of the small
You can send it this way, and I'll bounce it over to him.
Daniel, what's the size of the small container?
Thank you. I don't know. Hey, Patrick, what's the size of the small container?
Daniel.
Is it 60 gallons?
I believe it. No, it's 42, I believe.
Okay.
42 gallons.
Yeah.
I'm kind of a trash guy. I love it. I like not making it.
Great. Continue to do that.
I will continue to do that, except, I strongly recommend you provide 5-gallon buckets and charge in 5-gallon increments, because I can go for, a month or two without producing a 5-gallon bucket. Now, I may be different because I'm crazy in that respect, but I think there's a real problem before, a smaller bucket is better. And having the increments bucket, buying incremental buckets as you need more seems much more likely to have people directly connected with their consequences on what they buy, what they eat, how they treat the world around them. And the other point I have is that putting it in the tax base based on assessed value means that somebody who has a more highly valued home, and I cannot remember, and I should know this off the top of my head, what the average value of a home in town is, but If you have a lot higher value home and you're paying more for trash whether you produce it or not. So there's another disconnect. I don't know how to address that. I'll admit that. And I would not be pleased to say, well, I never called the police, so therefore, no. I think these services are essential for a lot of the services the town provides are essential. But the one thing we all have discretion on is how much trash we produce. And,
Thank you.
we don't have discretion on how much we pay for it.
Yep.
So thank you.
Thank you. Anne?
My name is Anne. I live in Brattleboro. I'm wondering about some logistical issues for households, and have they been considered? A little bit piggybacking on Tom's thing about the 42-gallon cans. The 64-gallon containers that are being, that I've seen that is going to be provided to the households in town, for one, they're too big for many of us. I don't want to have to be schlepping around a 64-gallon container. Just the logistics of where I live, the topography, makes it pretty difficult. There's stairs and a hill and everything that's involved in that. And I can imagine we have a lot of, we're an aging town. We're not a very youthful town, so we have a lot of people that are going to have difficulty, I believe, with those size trash cans. The other thing that concerns me is that we had this big rollout not that many years ago, it seems like, to go to the new system that we have where we've got composting, which I love, by the way. Mm-hmm. But what happens to the thousands of the plastic trash cans that we all have currently that we're using for our trash? And now I'm just learning that we're going to be getting new plastic, I assume, recycling containers, because that's only going to be picked up every other week. I would be one of those households that we also produce a lot more recycling than we do trash. So ours needs to go out every week, or we don't have enough of a thing. That means what happens with all of those plastic containers? I am a big proponent of not bringing plastic into the house if I don't have to. I would like for the town to start to be conscious of those investments in plastics, which I'm not even going to go into the politics of plastics, but I'm just wondering, what does happen with that? That's a lot of plastic hanging around town. Another logistical thing is that I live on a very narrow one-way street in town, and just because of that, sometimes it's a challenge for me to get in and out of my own driveway because of trash can placement up and down the street on the Tuesday mornings after my trash is picked up. So now we're going to have larger cans. We're going to have automated trucks without people that can make sure that those trash cans aren't strewn in the street. And then we've got winter coming and snow plowing, and everybody doesn't just run out on Tuesday mornings and bring their trash cans in. So that is going to be another potential problem, in addition to the rural and the steep and the dead end and things like that. As it is on the street where I live in the wintertime, I've had to call the Department of Public Works before and ask them to make another pass down our street, because as it is, you can't walk up the street and have a car coming down. You have to actually step into a snowbank as you're walking and wait for the car to pass before you can get back in the street and walk up our street. So that's a concern.
Thanks, Anne.
Two more points that I just want to make.
Real quick.
Nobody has mentioned at all the something that is in the paperwork for this, the recycling costs. The fact that the town used to be paid for recycling, and now the town pays for recycling, and we have no control, nor do we know how that is going to impact any of this. And it's also my understanding that Casella owns the landfill where our trash ultimately goes, and they are our hauler. And I do believe, correct me somebody if I'm wrong, that is the landfill that sets the tipping fee.
Okay, thank you. A lot of comments there, a lot of questions. They're all good ones. I I think I heard a question about what's going to happen to the existing containers. Right?
Nothing.
Patrick or John, are you able to answer that? Because I feel like that's an easy one.
Well, I can, for one thing, the compost containers won't be changing. Those are going to continue as is. The recycling containers would be changed over, so the ones that are out there now would be need to be recycled. So that, and really, a lot of your questions, Anne, the town doesn't have a lot of options on these. We had one company respond to our RFQ, and that was Casella, and we've been trying to do the best we can with a lot of these same concerns that you're raising, and trying to get the best deal that we could with them. And they've been very good. They've worked with us, and I think they will continue. If the board approves this contract, I think they will continue to work with us to try to work out the difficult areas and everything else. I'm pretty confident in just how we've spent time with them. They seem to be a very community oriented and good company, and I would like to hope that continues. So, but there are good points.
Okay, thank you. Other members of the public that wish to speak, and we are. Patrick, are you saying yes? I see. So I think I said Ken a while back.
Can I just interject something here?
Yeah, real quick.
Piggybacks off of what John said. You know, it wasn't, and what Tim also had mentioned about, trying to help a small local family company here retool. And if I'm speaking out of turn, please tell me. But I think that the question was asked and it was answered with thanks, but no thanks. So, I mean, it wasn't like our department heads didn't try to get every door open. We just had the one that we have to deal with.
Okay, thanks, Peter. I think Ken was next.
Hello, Ken Fay, District 8. I would like to first ask about the process, because I was one of the focus group people, and it said that there were meet twice with these groups. And did I miss it? Did I sleep through that one, or did I not get invited? That would be one. The other thing, I'd like to agree with Tim and about the smaller places. We have BDCC, we have business incubators. Instead of just going to ask somebody, if we can go to people who actually do that and say, hey, we have these resources, would like you to compete against this public company. It seems tough, but you're part of us. You know, we can use it, us against them. You were mentioning about negotiating with Casella. What were you negotiating? How were you negotiating? Just the kindness of their heart? They're a public company. You say they're good with community. They may have just been, yesing you, patting you on the back. They answer to shareholders. They're a business. That's what they do. So I guess that's, what else was I? Yeah, they have huge economies of scale. Why they would charge more than a local place when they have, way more economies of scale. That's about it. Thanks.
Thanks. I'm going to respond to that. So we put out a request for qualifications at the very beginning of this process. How long ago? A year ago?
No, 8 months ago or something.
Okay, 8 months ago.
Something like that.
And we had one respondent. That's not because we didn't send it to the local folks. It's because they didn't respond. And I don't know why they didn't respond, and I can't speak to that, and that's not, really for discussion here. But we had one respondent, and so what we have in front of us tonight is a decision. Do we want to continue to provide these services in this community? I believe we do. And, if we choose right now to say, wow, we should blow up this process and go back and, incubate a new solution, that's maybe a fine idea for years down the road, but we need to have a contract for January 1. So I just want to kind of name that. Patrick, can you speak to the focus group process real quick? Ken was alluding to 2 meetings, if you can remember.
So the focus groups were something we did back in, I'm guessing, May? and we had 4 of them, to my recollection, and there was a group from addresses in West Brattleboro, and there was a group of renters, there was a group of RTM members, and a group of closer to the downtown addresses. And so, we were trying to ascertain,
And how many meetings did we have?
Each group had a meeting.
Okay.
And our objective was to find out if there were differing views based on I live downtown versus I live in, West Brattleboro, or if I'm going to be a RTM member, and so I'm going to, hear about
That's
this
fine.
later,
That's fine.
et cetera.
Ken thought there was 2, but I'm guessing there was just 1. So I'm going to move on, Ken. I think that's,
I got a question. I need answers.
Yeah, that's great. So we've quite a few other people, and we've had folks raising their hands as well. So, Mark, do you want to speak right now?
Right now.
Go ahead.
Mark Younger, District 7. Peter, Richard, you guys are sounding like you're trying to save us some money. Did you guys ever bring up, like they did with rescue, that we, Brattleboro, would take it on ourselves, build our own facility, and do it ourselves? Because, like rescue, they charged us way too much, and we bought our own ambulances. We did everything ourselves. So did you guys discuss that? And if so, how intensely did you do it?
It's a great question, and I love that you think that's the money-saving option.
I'm asking. Yeah.
So building a whole new infrastructure for this service would be extremely costly. I think in the very beginning of our discussion around this, we recognized the similarity between these situations. I would say that.
But how are we going to allow a monopoly to take over everything? You people sitting there have got to think about other ways this can happen. You got to do something to get somebody else to help either bid or we do it ourselves.
Got it. Franz.
Yeah, I'd like to address that. That's certainly an idea that I had and that we have talked about. That's not a new idea. And there's a couple of reasons that we're not pursuing that. One is the initial expense, which would be a lot, but we could manage that. We'd have to bond for the purchase of trucks and, go through that whole financial process. That's doable. The problem is that it would take us a long time to set that up, and what would we do in the meantime? That's partly why I asked about the 3 versus 5 year contract, was that if we want to go through that process, it's a very large if, but if we want to go through that process to set up a municipal trash service, it would take 3 to 5 years to do it probably. So maybe we could still look at that at some point. I don't think there's a lot of appetite for that on this board, at least until we get our budget set. But
we're not going to get into that.
It's a big undertaking. I don't think we're ready to do it right now. I think we could do it someday. But there's a fly in the ointment, which is that Casella owns the landfill. If we collect all this trash, where do we take it? Now, maybe we then make a deal with Casella to use their landfill, or maybe we don't. I'd like to see the state open up landfills for towns to use around the state. But that's, again, we're talking about very long-term perspectives here. It doesn't help us decide what are we going to do with our trash contract, which expired July 1st. We're operating without a contract now. We've got to do something now to address this issue. Your idea may come into play at some point, but it'll be in the future.
Thanks. All right. Who else wished to speak on this matter that has not been heard? Frick, then Dick, then Bob. Then we're going to come back to the board.
You got one up there.
Yes, Bob. Yeah.
Rick Sprite, District 9 Rep. I'd like to give a little historical perspective. Back in the day, Triple T picked up everybody's garbage. At one point, the select board suddenly decided that some residential buildings were commercial and stopped picking them up. Ever since then, there's been double dipping on the bigger buildings, the buildings that typically house people who don't have vehicles, cannot bring their recycling to what was recycling centers around town, which no longer exist. now have to take it to the Ferry Road, I suppose. So there's been double dipping on those properties. Then when the pay-as-you-throw began, the double dipping happened in the form of our dumpsters that we had to get before that, have been prime targets for those who want to avoid the fees for the bags. That's been a bigger problem for some than for others, but I think it's been a universal problem. And now with this new system, unless you're going to pick up everybody's garbage, there's going to continue to be double dipping on some of mine and other properties around town. And I would like that issue addressed.
Okay. What kind of address would you like?
Are you going to give us a tax break or for the amount of the trash collection, or are we going to continue to pay for a service that we're not getting?
Okay, thank you. Patrick or John, would you like to speak to commercial properties?
I'm talking about residential properties here.
Okay, a couple things. The curbside collection program has been designed for residential properties. That can easily be misunderstood to be properties where people live. It's a little bit more nuanced than that. The assessor's office identifies properties as either residential or commercial. Okay? You can have, for example, a parcel that has, let's say, a small retail shop and maybe there's an apartment upstairs. That's a commercial property. There may be somebody living in that, and that living arrangement is a residential arrangement, but it's a commercial property. And it's been the long-standing position of the board, I don't know how far back, but certainly predating my employment with the town, that commercial properties should be responsible for their solid waste collection, that a commercial property is a business, and that solid waste is a business expense. And so the program is for residential properties, and yet it's true, all property owners contribute to the cost because the cost is embedded in the general fund.
Okay, thank you. Dick.
One of the great things that the residential properties benefit from is the commercial properties pay for trash pickup, but they don't get it. So when one of the previous speakers talked about high property landowners paying a great deal in their taxes, well, that's true, but commercial properties, I was a commercial property owner on Main Street, and there was never any trash pickup on Main Street. I was on the board when the board determined that when we were going to pay as you throw, that properties with 5 apartments or more were deemed commercial properties. And that's where that came from. It came from when we started the trash, when we started doing trash pay as you throw. So that's where that is. My question was asked the last time that, not by me, but somebody, I was going to ask it. There was a discussion about large item pickups when we see furniture on the street or other things. Was that negotiated into this contract? And also Morningside Commons, which, even though they're individual units, they pay for trash pickup, but composting is picked up by Triple T or as we're going now. Will that continue to happen down there? Are they included in at least the compost pickup? Thank you.
Thanks. Patrick, can you speak to those two very specific questions?
Can I speak to which?
The questions that Dick just asked. Do you need me to rephrase them? Will Morningside continue to receive commerce services?
I think that would continue as it currently exists.
Did the contract include large item collection?
The contract will ultimately include large item collection, the details of which we haven't finalized just yet.
Okay.
But in essence, there will be a menu for large item collection that'll happen at a to-be-determined, not weekly interval.
Great, thank you. Let's go to Bob, who's been waiting patiently on Zoom. And waiting patiently on Zoom with your Zoom hand raised in the air is a little easier than waiting patiently in this room. So I privilege the folks in the room, I'm afraid to say, Bob.
Hello, good evening, and thank you for taking the call. Can you hear me?
Connection.
What was I going to say? So maybe this summarizes some stuff. Mechanized or automated collection is probably not going to work in all the neighborhoods in Brattleboro. I think you've heard some of that. Small streets, dead ends is going to be a problem. The more rural areas may also have challenges. So is there a way, have you compared with other towns that have similar geographies to Brattleboro, how that automated or mechanized system will work or not work? And that was a question someone asked me today. I'm going to agree with Tim Wessel. So this may be a calendar day to mark. Not producing or not giving a franchise to one company, because those pieces that may not fit into the contract may fit into somebody else's contract. They may not be able to do it for 4,000 households, but another company may be able to satisfy some of the niche problems that you have. So rather than handing out a franchise, can we at least let other options develop over the next 5 years? And is there some ability to opt out? I mean, that's sort of a personal question. I understand Daniel's position that we are all putting money into a pot so that everyone can have a service, and I don't mind contributing to that. But still, those large containers, if you go to the automated, are really going to be a disaster in certain neighborhoods. We heard that from some folks who were at a district meeting the other day. Thank you for taking these comments, and I'll stop right there. Thank you very much.
Bob, all right, let's go with the last one first. Can you opt out? Patrick, can you opt out of this system?
If the board chooses to direct staff to execute a contract that includes trash, recycling, and organics, then no, there's no opting out.
Okay. That's fine. Thank you.
What I would say to the broader question about, have we looked at the topography of different towns? The answer to that is no. We've focused solely on a service in Brattleboro. And what I would say is Brattleboro is a complicated place to deliver. I would imagine just about everywhere is complicated, but Brattleboro has its own complications. We have a certain number of roads that are, one way only. We've got a certain number of roads that are, way more narrow or windy than let's say your typical road. And we've got places where there are roads where frankly there's just no way to turn around at the end of that road. Just to pick one off the top of my head, Stark Road. And so there have been and have always been certain unique locations where the norm is addressed differently. And that will carry forward with this contract with Casella, just as it has been with Triple T for all of these years.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to bring it back to the board. We've had a motion on the table for quite some time now. We've spent probably about 40 minutes longer than we thought we would, but everyone's comments, questions are really important. And I think ultimately, a lot of these questions are about operations. Some of them are about what might happen in the future. But the question before us tonight is, will we execute a contract, and will that contract include trash or pickup or not? And so, board, are you ready for that question?
I am.
Okay, seems like you are. So way back when, I think it was Liz that made a motion to authorize the town manager to finalize and execute a 5-year contract with Casella Waste Systems, Inc. for the solid waste collection and disposal services for the curbside collection program, the downtown public trash and recycling cans, and for all of the municipal facilities to begin January 1, 2025, consistent with option B, which includes trash pickup, as presented. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. We're going to take a break for 5 minutes. Come back at 8:42. All right, Peter. So we are going to, come back, and the only item left on our agenda is to review FY26 budget open house feedback and budget alternates. And Town Manager John Potter's going to do a little presentation about that.
Yep, and thanks, Daniel. Welcome. So really 3 things in this, just an update on the process that you approved for a budget process back in August, I believe. We're now, we've had the open house. We are now at the stage of exploring options, budget alternates. And in the memo, I provide an overview of the development process, feedback from the November 12th budget open house, and the next steps for refining the budget. There's an updated list of potential budget alternates, and we're requesting select board input on that list and on the proposed schedule for further discussions. So during the budget open house, this was held at the library. There were about 30 or 40 attendees that shared concerns, including the potential tax increase that would be needed for capital projects and equipment and continuing services, town services, and its impact on residents with fixed incomes. Participants requested more explanations regarding the capital equipment list, the estimated tax increases, and more detail on items like the counseling retainer and wage increases that are tied to collective bargaining agreements that the town is currently in. Additional suggestions were included things like modifying the trash collection that we just talked about to an opt-in or opt-out or an enterprise fund, providing support for landlords dealing with tenants who do not pay rent. Some attendees expressed confusion about funding allocations, such as the funding for the Downtown Brattleboro Association, and asked for clarity about vacancies and base compensation study results. Positive feedback included some level of satisfaction that the pool renovation project is not included in the FY26 base budget. Staff noted that no recommendations are currently being made for specific budget alternates, but mainly because their potential impacts need to be analyzed further before we really know what the trade-offs would be, what you would be giving up. But we have identified a list starting on page 76 of potential changes to the base budget that could either increase it or decrease it, mostly decrease it. And these were potential alternates that were suggested either at the open house or by the select board at your previous meeting or in other conversations that staff have had with people in the community. So those on page 76, they list out 17 different potential changes to the base budget. Questions that we have for the board are these the right things? Are we on the right track for looking at either savings or a few potential increases that were mentioned? Also included in this memo was an updated capital projects and equipment replacement list with additional information in that. So that is basically an overview of the information that we have for you tonight, and we'd love to get your feedback on the list of potential budget alternates and also your thoughts on how we should proceed further with this into December and January.
Great. Thank you, John.
Yep.
If the board doesn't mind, I'm going to speak first on this one. There's no reason why the chair can't speak first. It's just I don't usually.
You go right ahead.
But I'm going to go right ahead. So I want to be clear with the public that a 22% increase in property taxes is extremely high, very hard to swallow, and for many people, really, really concerning. And so what I'm going to ask for is that we, instead of trying to kind of like whittle it down over like 15 or 18 or 25 little decisions that might add up to something, I'm going to ask that the town staff spend the next several weeks taking another look at the budget, reducing it by 10%. So the current actual dollar expenditures for the budget, including the decision that we just made about trash, is around about 26.5 million. And so I'm going to ask the town staff, go back, take a look at the budget, reduce it by 10%, bring us back that budget, show us the implications of those cuts, because believe me, there will be major implications. And then when we have that information in front of us, we'll be able to have some very hard conversations about what is palatable and what is not. I want to say that I think we should try to have as few staff cuts as possible in that, and that we will obviously need to preserve the decision we made about solid waste just now. And I think that we should try to preserve the decision that we made earlier in the fall about the Downtown Safety Action Plan. And so we do have a meeting scheduled for December 10th that would have been a special meeting, an additional, special just means additional. It would have been an additional meeting, and I'm going to propose that we do not have that meeting. We give town staff more time, and that they come back to us on the 17th. I thought we had a meeting, but maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, the second meeting in December.
Yes.
Come back to us on the 17th with this revised budget. Be ready to talk about what it means to make that kind of cut. And I would further propose that if it is possible within that time frame to also show a 5% reduction, that would be interesting to look at as well. But I think if we can start at 10, that will be something to work with. And I am not proposing at this point that that is a budget that we will then be like, yep, great, send it to town meeting. I'm saying we will need to have a close look at that and decide whether it is something that we want to do as a community. And so, board, that is what I'm suggesting for you all. Elizabeth.
I am in favor of that suggestion from Daniel. I think it gives the town manager and the staff time, but also the initiative, because actually they know best. They know the ins and outs of the budget and so forth, and it also values our town employees who are necessary in doing a good job. And I particularly think that we should have both the 10% and the 5%, because I think that we'll between those two, we'll really understand what we can do with the budget, how we can get those numbers down, what we can live with, and what services we as a town really do need the municipality to provide.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, just for clarification, what you're suggesting is like we don't go through this thing line item,
right,
that we give them more time. Okay, just with that clarification, I agree. I want to put a pretty big exclamation point after the part about reducing currently employed staff. That I'm not you'll lose me there, because I know, I've told you before, I'll say it again, I know how that ends. It doesn't end well when you start to overtax the people who work in your community, the people who work for your town, putting your town together. It just won't end well. And again, just to remind everybody, it's nothing you will see in the first 6 months, 8 months, but by the time you ring out to the end of a year, that's when you begin to see the effects and you begin to see people leaving. It's not a good thing. So I do agree with you, but I just wanted to make that extra point.
No, absolutely. Richard, Franz?
Thank you, Daniel. The spending increases that are driving our budget up are recurring items. These are things that we've put in the budget for, some of them for the current fiscal year, others for the next fiscal year, and they're going to recur every year after that. Now, there may be some modifications over time. You know, if there was some, I don't know what those modifications would be, but, you know, the two main ones are the downtown safety initiatives and solid waste. The solid waste is locked in for 5 years now, and I suspect the time frame on downtown safety would be at least similar to that. So the point is that whatever we're going to do to try to address this budget, it has to be things that will then carry forward along with these budget increases. If we try to save money on things that we make go away for 1 year, but then those same things are back the following year, plus other, say, infrastructure expenses, that there is no path forward there that resolves the problem for more than a single year. It's if we adopt one-time cuts, we're fooling ourselves about having solved the problem. Look good for a while, and then it's going to come right back and bite us a year from now. So my point is not even to say that we shouldn't do some of that. You know, it might be unavoidable, but my point is that the only way to make long-term cuts in our budget, given that our budget is 2/3 expenses on staff, I don't see how we can do this without cutting staff, which is not something, you know, there's nothing cheerful about saying that. But I think, you know, if we're looking at a 10% cut from what's here on paper, we're looking at staff cuts, and there's no way around it. If we don't do that, we would eviscerate our infrastructure and other maintenance programs for the town, and then we just have to put those dollars back in next year with no source of funding for them. So, you know, the source of funding for this is the property tax, and if we don't want to raise the property tax, we've got to cut our expenses over the long term. If we do cut, you know, I'm just quickly dealing with your suggestion, Daniel. If we cut 10% of a $26.5 million budget, we'd be just right around $24 million. Now, $24 million would be a $1 million increase over last year's budget. So, which is what, 4% roughly? So there's, and what that would correspond to in a tax increase, I don't know, because we are losing some revenue sources this year. So we'd still be looking at an appreciable tax increase even if we achieved that goal of a 10% cut. So the only thing I'm trying to do is underline the real nature of this question and the types of steps that we're going to have to be looking at in order to try to come to some resolution.
Mm-hmm. Richard?
So it seems like, say there was a 10% cut in the budget, that doesn't translate to 12% overall cut. It's more complicated than that.
Are you saying, so what I'm talking about is a 10% cut in the dollar value of the budget, right, and that won't necessarily have a corresponding 10% right, reduction in the tax rate increase. It's right, more complicated.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make that clear. Yeah. And then maybe this is really obvious, but I think after we get the new budget from the town departments, I think we have to be very clear to look at whatever recommendations are made aren't going to be things that next year are going to cost us a lot more money. And I think so we have to really, maybe they'll already think of that, but I think we just have to keep that in mind.
Yes, I think that the work that we're asking town staff to do is extremely difficult and will be very challenging. And if I'm being honest, will be demoralizing. And I don't take that lightly. And I know that it will be really hard for them to do that work and bring something back to us. And when it comes back to us, we will need to do some very hard work about deciding what is okay. And you guys will need to let us know what is okay. And we'll need to make that decision together.
And we'll have about 2 weeks or so to be able to make a final decision on that.
A little longer than that.
A little longer.
Yeah. Peter?
Yeah, so again, one of the things that lowers our tax rate is increasing our grand list, correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So this is where Franz and I will be chasms apart, right? I look at saying, instead of cutting, let's take existing staff and let's not cut them, and let's task them or a small committee of them in ways that we can grow our tax base. Maybe invite some business that can lower the tax rate to grow, in essence, to sell our town to a different outside community that can bring them in, that can grow our grand list and do things like that. That to me is how we should be looking to use our resources and becoming a little bit more business friendly and growing the grand list and not looking to cut never ends well. 35 years of experience in that, I can tell you that firsthand. It doesn't end well.
Yeah. That's fair. And, I'm not saying that these cuts will be exactly what we want to do. I'm saying let's have everybody see what that means, because everybody's telling us 22% is too high. That is what, we're getting a lot of feedback about. They're not saying, I need you to stop plowing my street. They're not saying, I need you to stop responding to this emergency call. But, let's see what a reduction in the budget looks like. Let's see the implications, and then let's make a decision about it together. And we'll see, we'll see how we do. I want to just add that Richard's point kind of reminded me of it. We're going to cut out this meeting on December 10th, but I think we may end up needing to add an extra meeting in January. So I'm looking at January 14th. Because likely we'll be doing more of that work then. So just don't plan any vacations in January.
I can't do it that day. I got to give my dog his heartworm medication.
Okay, bring the dog to the meeting. All right. Okay, board, can we hear from the public for a little bit?
Just one other thing I'd like to throw in, which is, we have talked about providing suggestions to John or the staff about places where we think that cuts could be made, and I think there would still be a role for that. If we have ideas, I think we should put them on the table. I've done a few of those, and I don't know what we want to do about that
so
in terms of the list
on page
tonight.
76 and 77.
Yeah, so I wouldn't eliminate that from the process.
I am not. I'm presuming that John and the staff will look at those ideas and think about how they can be part of a $2.6 million reduction in this budget. If there are $2.6 million worth of reductions on these 2 pages, I'll be surprised. Frick. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Frick Sprite, District 9 Rep. This is something I wanted to put in earlier, but is more appropriate here. We have issues with, I totally support not getting rid of town staff as much as possible, unless possibly through attrition. I think we have a real problem with these single bid contracts. I think we're way overpaying for things that we're getting on that front. We've talked a lot about the need for community building. I think we have an opportunity to get creative and more thoughtful and dig deeper into the resources in this community and in town staff to do projects that we are currently bidding out and getting single bids on that are overpriced, because there's only a single bidder and they already know what the budget is, and so they nail it. We have very talented town staff. We have very talented people in the community who would step up for a variety of purposes. The bandstand at Estiville comes to mind. I'm sure there's 100 other things that Now, in the garbage thing, I thought, I didn't have an exact idea, but I thought that was another opportunity for community building, perhaps, and avoid a huge increase in the budget. I think we need to do some serious brainstorming, because what we're doing now is not heading in a good direction. The taxes have already been insanely high in town, and this just puts a finer point on it. We have resources in the community that we can use if we're willing to think in a different paradigm than we have been. So I think we can have our cake and eat it too. And so again, let's get creative. Let's crowdsource ideas. Thanks.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Ms. O'Connor.
Hi, Kate O'Connor, Brattleboro. I want to thank Franz for what he said, because as you know, I do the "you're building a house of cards, it's going to collapse" analogy a lot. And Franz is 100% right. You have to look towards the future, whatever you do. And I don't think it's right at this point for you folks to take things off the table and say, I'm not going to support that. You don't know what it means for the budget. So I hope the town staff is going to look at everything and come back with a proposal. As you know, you're going to have to make tough decisions, but to say right now, I'm not going to support that, to me is being very short-sighted, because you don't know. And we have to think long-term. We're going off a cliff. It's making me really worried. So, and I really hope what town staff comes up with is something that you're willing to do if it happens, because, it might happen. And so don't write things on a piece of paper that's going to sound like really dramatic and everybody's going to go, no, we can't do that. So I hope, and I appreciate, Daniel, what you said. I think this is a better way to do it. But please, when you're doing it, don't just think about this year. Think about next year, because if you don't do it right now, we're going to be right back here next year, and it's going to be 1,000 times worse. And whoever's on the board is going to have to be making even worse decisions than you think you're going to have to make. So thank you, Franz.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Ben.
Hi, Ben. Yeah, come on in.
I have a general question. I just don't understand. Ben, I live on Bullock Street.
Okay.
What happened this year or last year to trigger this unusual high tax?
Because,
I mean, something must have happened. What's
Yep, I can answer that. I'll try. We'll see how I do. So, really, the two main drivers in this are increased expenses for police expenses, some of which are uniformed officers some of which are sworn officers, some of which are different kind of level of officers that are going to work downtown. There's also increased capital in here, so like infrastructure, vehicles, that kind of thing. And then the other thing is the cost of the solid waste contract. That's a major driver as well. And then we have other things that are kind of like a little more baked in, honestly. Like we have union contracts that we negotiate over a 3-year term, and there are salary increases that add up. But really those three other things that I named are like the big main drivers. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Tim?
Tim Wessel, District 3/9. I'm going to refer to it that way from now on. I had this really weird moment back there, Daniel, because I have this Post-it in my hand, and this is my Post-it for this line item. And it says, direct John to go back to each department and take 10% off their budgets. And I talk about how this is going to be a painful experience, but it's better than the alternative, which I think you're definitely heading towards a rejection of the budget at RTM. And that's going to be even messier and more painful than a real hard look budget, department by department at the budget that you have. I have all kinds of things on the other side of my Post-it, which are, why don't we look into this? Why don't we look into that? But I don't think this is the right time for it. I think you know, out of respect, as Liz kind of said, for staff, let's because it's an incredible staff, you and I both know, and I really think that there's going to be some creative ideas, and let's give that a shot. The one point I want to make is that I don't know where COLA stands as far the cost of living increases stands as far as union negotiations, but I don't think that the norm has to be 4%. The new, just announced last month, the Social Security Administration announced 2.5% this year. Sometimes it's way up at 7, and sometimes it's at 0.5. So we can't expect people to be expecting a 4% increase year after year. That's my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Ivan?
Hello, my name's Ivan Hennessy. I live on South Main Street, and I just want to say something that's been said a couple times tonight already, but I want to make it very clear. Everyone who was asking for more police presence was asking for either a tax increase or a cut to everything else in the town, or both. And I want to take a really unfair dig at Tim and say, weren't you here arguing against cost of living increases when the cost of living went up 8% in a single year and the staff came back with 4%?
Could you not direct your comments at someone else in the audience? You can direct them at me.
No, I'm done.
Yeah.
But
Right.
it's the police issue is a big deal.
Yeah, thank you. We try not to, call each other out. Let's go to Fidel, and then we'll go to Mary, and then Amanda, and then Dick. I think it's David Levenbach, but I'll be pleasantly surprised if it was Mr. Castro.
Except he's dead.
Well, I'd be even more surprised than wouldn't I?
Or Raul.
Yeah, I'm not up to date.
That's fine. And I want to highlight a distinction between what Mr. Quip has recommended and what Mr. Wessel has suggested, and that is Mr. Quip called for a 10% and a 5% revision in the overall budget. And I think the implication of what the comment made by Mr. Wessel, and I'm not attacking him or directing it to him, is essentially a 10% cut in the various departments. And, from my study of policy and so forth, this notion of 10% across the board cuts is a terrible way to make critical decisions. So I would encourage going with Mr. Quip saying, cut the budget 10% wherever it has to be. Some departments may be more than 10%, some may be less. But across the board, I think, is insensitive decision-making. Thank you.
A phrase that I heard not so long ago was to be hard on ideas and kind on people. So let's try and do that. Who is next? Mary?
Mary Del Priori, Brattleboro, and I've learned a lot tonight, and these lovely people have asked questions that I wanted to ask. I was going to focus in on the 16% raise for the head and the cost of living increase, and the fact of most of the other increases, too, have to do with personnel. I guess afterwards, I just want to sort of clarify as a resident, none of this is inconvenient. It's burdensome. We already had our taxes raised. The Vermont is not giving us the break on property taxes. They changed their policy. So we're already burdened, and now you're talking about burdening us more. Every dollar you take from us is a dollar we won't spend downtown, right? Because this is money we'd already budgeted. Maybe it's our expendable cash, right, that you're going for, but it's money that we won't go out to eat with. So you're talking about bringing new businesses in and creating a better grand list. You're walking in the opposite direction. I have 2 apartments. You're talking about raising my property taxes. I'm going to pass that on. You're walking away from affordable housing. As you stress people out more financially, you're walking towards an unhealthier town because of this. So thank you for looking for 10% more. I think if you can stay as close to the 90 to 24 budget as possible, say no to any kind of extra expansion, whether it be human services or whatnot. We're already burdened. That the school got to the trough first, right? If we were here and it was all at the same time, then we could divvy up better, but the school system got to us first and took the money. So that leaves us in a tight spot this year, and I love the idea of a 5-year plan. The other part that weighs into the decisions you're making right now, my 36-year-old son and his wife just came back from Denver, and they're looking where they're going to live. And guess what conversation we're having in the kitchen right now? So should they live in Brattleboro, or does it not have enough of an economy anymore? Is it a dying town? So big picture, this isn't just about your 22%, it's about how it's impacting us and the health of the town. So thank you.
Thanks. I want to point out we are all impacted, every single one of us here. And so there's not some, like, we don't get a tax break, just because we sit here. Dick.
Oh, Amanda was.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. Amanda.
Amanda, District 7, Brattleboro. I want to circle back to the Windham Windsor Housing Trust presentation at the beginning.
Is it germane to the budget?
It is,
Good.
because it's a question I didn't get to ask, which was, is there a budget line within the intentional plan development or any intentional plan development for security? That would be where the intentional plan development organization pays that budget item and takes on that financial burden to therefore relieve some of our extra policing, fire, etc., or contribute to the town for their estimated use of emergency services. There's some known criteria now, some known factors related to calls, and some of that economic burden could go on the developer. Just a thought.
Okay. Dick.
Well, I thank you for making that suggestion, 10%. Well, what's disappointing is then all of a sudden we make qualifications as to what we can't touch. No one is guaranteed a job anywhere, except it seems like if you're working for the town of Brattleboro. No one runs for the board, and certainly I speak for myself, didn't run for the board to say, okay, I'm going to cut staff. You got to play the cards that you have, and you got a bad hand, and you have to deal with it. But when I sit and listen to you and go, well, we can't, you're making an assumption that people can't do the job if we reduce staff in several areas, that we're going to fall apart. There's some staff that certainly I could suggest, what I won't at this point. If somebody wants to talk to me, I'll give you my suggestions that are not critical and essential to the operations of the well-being of the town, that nothing's going to happen to us if they're not here. The staff that are in the budget, Kate is right. It's a residual cost that we're going to have next year. And so you're doing John and Patrick a disservice by saying, bring me back something but exclude this. Now, Franz has said he would like to see staff people included in this, and I'm sitting there going, well, I heard one board member say it's a no-go. And so I think all of you need to be in unison to say, now whether you adopt that, but I think you have to tell the town manager and the assistant town manager, say, we can't do anything with trash because that's it, we just voted on the 5-year contract. But everything else is literally on the table. And then it's what you can stomach when we come back here January 10th to say, I can go along with that, I can't go along with that. The 5% looks better, or maybe you get it to 7%. But don't sit there and say, no, don't look there, don't look here, and then put more pressure on other departments or other areas because you're trying to preserve something and not be a bad guy. There was a time that the select board cut 10 positions in this town. And as I always say, we survived. I'm not advocating for staff cuts, but the reality is they have to be on the table and part of this. So please, no sacred lambs. Thank you.
Thank you. I think what I said at the beginning was as few cuts as possible and preserve those two programs. And if 3 of my board members want to say something different than that, I'm welcome to hear it, but I heard general consensus around that. Yep.
I definitely would take exception to that. I think we do have to look at the Downtown Safety Action Plan as a potential place for cuts to be made. We added 9 positions in adopting that. We weren't looking at the whole budget at that time, and I'm not trying to dictate an answer, but I think that's one of the places we have to look, along with everywhere else.
Okay. Is that what the rest of you want to do? Okay. So I guess not.
I'm sorry, what are we saying now? I need to be clear on this. And if I need to make a motion that everybody votes on, I don't think we do this by head nods.
Okay. So you were pretty clear in what you just said. You said that you don't, that you want cuts from the Downtown Safety Action Plan to be on the table.
Yeah.
And then I asked if anyone was interested in that.
Okay.
And it didn't seem that they were. But if you want to make a motion, I will absolutely entertain it.
Okay, I'll need a few minutes to figure out what I would want to do.
Okay. I think, going back to like the original intent here, I'm trying to give our town staff and our department heads the flexibility because they understand the inner workings of their departments because they are running them every single day. We show up every 2 weeks. And I want to give those people the respect and the time to really investigate ways to bring this whole budget down. And, like David was like, well, Tim's thing, blah, 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 Daniel's thing, blah, blah, blah. I'm trying to say a 10% reduction in the budget. I don't mind how we get there, right? It's going to impact different departments differently, I'm sure, but the conditions in different departments are also different. And so I want to give people a bit of leeway, but I also want to respect the fact that this whole board here, already made some decisions, and we haven't even given those a chance to actually move forward.
So I'm just going to chime in right here and say that I agree with your original statement, and that's the one I'll support.
Mm-hmm. Kate would like to say something. Maybe that'll be helpful for us.
It probably won't be.
Okay.
Kate O'Connor, Brattleboro. I think you've just defeated the whole purpose of what you're trying to do. If you say, no, you have to hire 3 police officers, you're defeating the purpose and saying you can't cut this town staff, you can't cut the downtown safety plan, you can't cut employees. You're defeating the whole purpose of what you're trying to do.
So, you and many of the other people who, I don't know, there is a number of people that have been present in our meetings all throughout this year. And, we were all here, we experienced it, and what we heard from the folks in this room was please make these investments. Please make these investments. And, there's, I don't think that was a uniform message, but I think that we heard the folks. We're hearing people now saying, well, we don't like this budget, it's too much. We're trying to find a path forward. What we're going to get to, Kate, is exactly some of the sort of hard conversations that we're starting to have tonight, but let's get to them when we have something in front of us, right? So I have a lot of trust in this man here and all of his staff. And I think that they will be able to, given a bit of time, come back to us with something that is worth considering. If you want to say to them, eviscerate everything, fine, so be it. France.
Well, I have a lot of trust in John, too, and I'm willing to extend that trust to look at the Downtown Safety Action Plan and come back and say, well, if we reduce it by a little bit, we'll lose this, but we'll still gain this. Mm-hmm. There's no reason not to look at that as something that is a possible area for changing the size of the program. And there are certain areas where we're contractually bound and we can't make changes. Mm-hmm. But this is not one of those areas, and there's no reason to treat it differently from every other important enterprise that the town is involved in.
All right. So, John, yes. Hello. I'm sorry, we're spending so much time talking about you. I don't know what that must be like for you. John, I think what's being asked here is like, hey, John, and all of your department heads, will you look at everything? You know, we're trying to give you some guidance that is clear and helpful, but like, if you were to say, for example, if you knew that the Downtown Safety Action Plan already had a few efficiencies in it without like gutting it completely, would you bring those back to us?
Yeah, I mean, the approach that we were using was a very participatory budget building process, and you're kind of shifting over to putting that on the staff to solve some of these problems or come up with some suggestions. However, I think that we would want to look at everything, so not totally like what Franz was saying, but maybe something kind of in between what the two of you were saying, that if there are things, like I get what you're saying, Daniel, that you had a lot of interest in the town in addressing these two big issues in the budget. I think there might be some things in both of those that we could improve in a suggestion that you could choose to do or not do, where maybe some pieces were deferred or we could find a different way to go, something like that. It still answers the concerns that you were hearing from hundreds of people in your meetings over the summer, and does continue to invest in Brattleboro to turn it around. You know, whacking off big parts of the budget is going to make it harder for us to grow the grand list. It's going to make it harder for us to attract people here. And I get that's a balance between the tax rate, but you know, we got to find that right balance, right, that exactly. We're not creating a place that's even worse to live because we don't have the services that people are used to having in this town and you know, have come to expect. Yep. So that's the real trick in this, and I think we would look at everything and try to come back with something that a majority of you could support as your budget. So
great, thanks, John.
Yep.
Dick.
You know, we've got a $12 billion grand list that's pretty hard to grow, that's going to have an appreciable impact on the taxpayers. And given what our tax rate is, it's not attractive for people to say, hey, I want to move my company to that town. Aside from the other issues, that tax issue that we have is a real no-go. But I want to get back to I wasn't here, Daniel. I just want to say I wasn't here when you did the police. I missed that meeting. I was here for the Brett, and I supported that. And what I have maintained all the time is that our police force has never been to 27 staff people. I had a conversation with somebody and says, yeah, I don't ever remember it being 27. And what I'm saying about that program is let's get to that number. I'm not saying we can't hire them, but let's get to that number. Let's see what the Brat team does, and then revisit the issue when the chief comes back and says, well, this is where we're at. This is what we're doing. I need to have 3 more people. Now, the school starts, I believe, in February. This budget doesn't get approved So you're talking, these people wouldn't be going to school until when, 27? Because they only do one school a year, and the budget doesn't get approved till, or 26, they would be going to school. And so giving what we have already done, giving that an opportunity to see if that's working. With all due respect, I think you overreacted, and I was one of the people here coming for the past 3 years talking about things that you didn't do. And you were focused on EMS, with all due respect, and the downtown was on fire and nobody did anything. And so now downtown comes front and center, and you go, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to spend $700,000 down at the transportation center. When I walked into that room where the old police department was this morning to talk with Officer Washburn and Jason, the new social worker, and I had a nice conversation with them, and that's a great space. And I'm going, why aren't we utilizing this and saving $700,000? I digress. But I think if you really listen to what I'm saying about the safety program, I'm not telling the chief she can't have her people. She just can't have them this year. And we'd like to see what she does with the people that everybody supported with the Brat team. And when she gets to 27 people, that's something that none of you have seen, and I can't remember when I saw 27 officers. And so she's doing a magnificent job.
Thanks, Dick.
With a minimal number. I can imagine when she gets to 27, she'll be doing a hell of a lot of a better job.
Thank you.
So please put that back on the table.
Yep, okay. All right, so I feel like town staff have clear guidance. I feel like everybody's had an opportunity to weigh in, and there'll be further opportunities to do so when we have something else to look at. So unless there's anything further, I think we should adjourn.
Is John clear on what we're asking him to do?
Yeah, I think so, Franz.
Great. Liz?
I move to adjourn.
Okay, all those in favor, please raise their hand and say aye. 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 Passes 5-0. We're adjourned. Thank you, interpreters. Thank you, BCTV. Thanks to town staff, members of the public, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Or something. Whenever that is.
1 year.